in June, Taiwan was included too, and Thailand too, I guess. Thailand, Singapore, blah blah blah. And after that, I think most likely in July they will most likely open it to more tourists if nothing goes on in June, and nothing like dramatic happen in June. So in phases.
Okay.
Yeah.
Finger crossed. And
Okay.
sure, you'll see a lot of Taiwanese go there.
Yes, and if you're
Rushing.
coming, please bring me some. Yeah, I'll let you know
I'll do
what
that.
what to bring me.
Pineapple cake.
太阳饼.
Oh, sound cakey. That's the name.
Tyler, where in the world are you right now?
Say again.
Where in the world are you right now?
Thailand.
In Thailand.
I was just about to suggest to you, Pauline, you can so-called Thailand is one of the options too to transit.
Oh yeah, maybe you can book Tyler's resort.
They're quarantined to go Thailand. Thailand, Hong Kong. I'm trying to hack to see if I can avoid it.
Yes, try to hack it. Use Thai Airway.
Yeah, there used to
stop
be
over Bangkok. Use Thai Airway.
There used to be a direct flight from Koh Samui to Hong Kong. There still might be actually.
She's in Vancouver.
Uh-huh.
I'm in Toronto.
Oh, sorry, Toronto. Oh, you're in Toronto? So have you met Heyman from Toronto too?
Not yet. We've been trying to meet up a couple of times, but it didn't work out. But hopefully soon, because the pandemic was in and out bad.
Toronto, yeah.
Oh, Eric.
Who else is here?
Have a good news, no? This is your last chance.
But Eric, you're in Vancouver or Toronto?
I'm in Toronto. I work about an hour away from Toronto in Waterloo. But recently, our little startup got featured in Waterloo Magazine. I'll share the link in the chat here in a moment. Featured my wife, and the article is like how you make a dent in the universe. So, kind of nice to see those kind of articles when you're working on.
You're in Tech Town. We should do a Toronto meetup someday. It's just like all people that are in the area.
Eric, I pinned an article on top, so whoever is interested in the story, just take a look at it.
Thank you.
So, shall we start with the non-tech news then? Who has some? Yeah. No one?
Who has a non-tech topic to share today?
Or maybe Ken has some must-share tech news before anything starts.
Well, I shared about that in the US, the leading cause of death is now through gun violence, an article that discusses that.
Uh-huh.
And then US seizes Iranian oil cargo near Greek island. I'm not sure what that is about, but that came out from Reuters today. It's kind of weird. Why would they do that? I have no idea. But
I was actually hoping you talked about that. I saw you repost that. It's really weird. I wondered what your first impressions was, Katerina.
I seriously I don't know why they would do that. Near Greece, I think it's mostly because there were Russian crews, like 19 Russian crew members on board that maybe had something to do with the sanctions on Russia for the invasion of Ukraine. So that's basically actually Russian related stuff on there, but on a Iranian oil cargo ship. I think that was what they thought. I don't know if they confiscated stuff from the Russians, but I think it has to do with the sanctions against Russia.
Can you please pin the link at the top of the room on this particular article?
I'm doing it now. I just got it from her Twitter account. Yes, I'm doing. Is it the one that US sees the Iranian oil?
Yeah.
I got it. Oil cargo near Greek
Uh-huh.
island.
Okay. I'd be curious about something they normally don't mention. And this is from my experience in the past. Several times it'll look like an oil ship, but that's not the actual contents. It's on the actual ship. So I wonder if it may have something to do with that.
Okay, well, let me I haven't read it. Let me read it for 2 seconds. The U.S. has confiscated an Iranian oil cargo held on a Russian-operated ship. Yeah, that's part of it. Near Greece, that's another part of it. Oh, and by the way, that infuriates Russia, by the way, because Russia from time to time needs to navigate through Greek waters to get through the Phosphorus Strait into the Black Sea up into parts of Russia. And that's an incredible vulnerability of national security that they have to navigate through Greek waters that their oil, that their lives depend and economy depends on, must travel through Greek territory, so to speak, because things like this article can happen. And somebody on stage will confirm that I said, and I normally used the reference of China's is similarly dependent on oil for their energy as a source of energy, and I often use that as the example that what you're going to see eventually happen. Did I say this or not? That the reason China is obsessed with building pipelines on the land, the Belt and Road Initiative, through specifically Pakistan to get pipelines on land through the Middle East to Iran. I said because they know those oil tankers leaving Iran must travel around the bottom of India. India could take that thing over anytime they want, which is a big part of the reason why China took over Sri Lanka. And then that boat also has to go up through the Indian Ocean, then has to go through the Straits of Malacca. China, that scares the shit out of China, that the Straits of Malacca could be shut down, and that would stranglehold China's entire existence in a weekend. So that's partly why they took over Myanmar. And because there's a pipeline that goes from Myanmar, from the Indian Ocean, straight up through the middle of Myanmar to Kunming, China, in southern China. So that to negate that existential threat of somebody closing the Straits of Malacca. They had to do that. That is not a nice to have. That is an existential critical threat must have. Because the U.S. could come into Singapore any day of the week and be like, hey, China, no more energy for your country. Do you understand me? It's game over. We could do that anytime we want. And they know that. And they, to their credit, are appropriately paranoid that we might do that. And that's why they funded the military coup that just happened in Myanmar to take back the country from the democratically elected party that was very pro-America, which, by the way, was starting to shut down the oil pipeline. Oh, gee, I wonder why the military came back in right as unmarked airplanes with their signals turned off from Beijing were landing in Myanmar days before the coup, and videoed with pallets full of something covered. Very, very large pallets were being delivered to Myanmar. I wonder what they were delivering. And anyway, so China took back Myanmar because they had to, because they need that oil pipeline. And all of this is because China is correctly paranoid about the U.S.'s ability to cut off its energy supply from the Middle East. Hence, they're spending literally trillions on the Belt and Road to get land, through Pakistan, through that whole partnership over the Himalayas. And similarly, Russia is also understandably paranoid about having to navigate through the Bosphorus Straits there into the Black Sea, through right past Istanbul there in Turkey, and through the Greek islands, and because someday, did I not say, what you're going to start seeing in the not so distant future is America stepping in and saying, you know what, that oil tanker, yeah, that's ours, thank you very much. Did I or did I not predict precisely this scenario of America flexing and no longer allowing oil tankers I used China as the example, but make no mistake, the alliance is, at the heart of it, China, Russia, and Iran. That is the heart of this new global alliance that they're going to try and assemble, which will include Myanmar, who gives a shit about that, Cambodia, big whoopie doo, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and the other Stan, whatever the hell, Kyrgyzstan or whatever it is, big wow, and versus essentially the entire West, Japan, South Korea, that the whole new alliance that was Biden just announced 48 hours ago, including Australia, New Zealand, and here it comes. Here comes the big end. America's starting to show, and there were a couple of instances where oil tankers got meddled with since we started Tech News a year ago. And in both, I can recall two different cases. One was that Israeli oil tanker or Israeli-owned oil tanker that got hit by a drone. That was quite interesting. And then the other one was a South Korean oil tanker that got pirated or whatever. And I remember when we read both those stories, I said, you know what? You got to really pay attention to these oil tanker stories because of what I'm describing now, which is the U.S.'s ultimate flex, having the world's most powerful navy by a mile, can control the delivery, the exporting and importing, particularly of food, but very particularly energy, which to a lot of countries is a big percentage of their economy. And that's why this story, people are going to not pay attention to this story. No one's going to pay attention to this story, right? Seems like a nothing burger of a story. U.S. seizes Iranian oil cargo near Greek islands. According to sources, Greek authorities last month impounded the Iranian-flagged Pegasus with 19 Russian crew members on board near the coast of the southern island of Evia, which, by the way, there's hundreds of those Greek islands down there that no one knows the names of, by the way, due to EU sanctions. They said the ship was impounded as part of EU sanctions on Russia for the invasion of Ukraine. However, the vessel was later released due to confusion about sanctions over its owners. The tanker, renamed Lana on March 1 and flying the Iranian flag since May 1, has remained near Greek waters since then. It was previously Russian flagged. A source at Greece's shipping ministry said Thursday that the U.S. Department of Justice had, quote, informed Greece that the cargo on the vessel is Iranian oil. Quote, the cargo has been transferred to another ship that was hired by the U.S., the source added, without providing further details. The development comes after the U.S. on Wednesday imposed sanctions on what it described as Russian-backed oil smuggling and money laundering network for Iran's Revolutionary Guards force, even as Washington tries to revive a nuclear deal with Iran. The U.S. and Russian officials did not immediately respond. So, watch out. You want to see how this geopolitical quagmire that we're, by the way, just only have our baby toes in at the moment, how this could quickly escalate. This is a perfect example because these ships are worth billions of dollars a piece with the cargo of oil on them, especially as the price of oil starts to skyrocket. Watch out. This is how shit gets real. This is how world wars get started, y'all. Precisely like that. So
that's why I was wishing, Tyler, there was more despair in your voice than enthusiasm, because you almost sound like a guy whose baseball team is beating the other team by 7 runs. And I'm not sure if this is great, you know?
I'm not living in America for partly these reasons, by the way.
Yeah, I remember there was a YouTube channel that covered the problem with China and Russia, that they're both landlocked and they're oftentimes under the mercy of either Japan or many European nations, and how perhaps some of the moves that these countries are trying to do, like the land-based pipelines, are a move to work around these sanctions, or in this case, actual sanctions. Historically, it was weird because America just took a bunch of islands after World War II. They're like, oh shit, we need to have all these islands and make sure we got the sea locked. And so I think everybody else woke up kind of late to the party and realized that they were kind of screwed. And America's strength, I think, comes out of the alliances. So Biden's recent trip has really showed the power of alliances.
Okay. Anyone else with a non-tech story?
Because we don't want to talk about the $60 billion deal in tech, right?
Which one? 60.
Uh,
Wait.
I mean, we discussed it the other day that it was rumored, but now it's official. Broadcom is buying VMware for $61 billion.
Okay, let's see. I'm sure that'll be in our list of top stories. Yes, it is. It's number 4. Number 3.
Um, Russia-related news. It said the Russia Parliament is about to vote to scrap the military age limit. Originally, the limit is about 40 years old. So this is a sign that uh, the Moscow may be trying to recruit more troops for the military campaign in Ukraine.
Okay, let me put a cherry on top of the previous point to really drive home the point. This might be the best opportunity to really drive home my big official rant. I have many rants, but my official rant is you need to take control of your own water, food, and energy. Here's why. Because if we go into another sort of world war scenario, even if it's an economic war or a cyber war, which those are certainly inevitable at this point, the in previous world wars, countries were not as interdependent on each other. There wasn't this big globalization effort. You know, the big globalization scenario happened immediately following World War II. So in the previous world wars, America was not really economically as dependent on China or anybody for that matter, nor was anybody overly dependent on anybody in the previous world wars. Now they are. And that is very worth marinating in that thought, because when those ties are cut, as a result, what will happen is in the midst of this new modern World War III of supply chains and pipelines and everything else, those international lines, be they cables or pipelines and supply chains, will get severed, and that itself will be a form of a kind of an attack. Meaning, we're going to stop your oil pipe. We're literally going to cut your oil pipeline or your internet cables, or we're going to stop your shipments of precious stuff. Oil tankers are high on that list, etc. And we're going to weaponize that, and we're going to say no more transporting oil tankers. And China knows this. This is obvious and it's very serious to China, who's spending trillions of dollars to address it with the Belt and Road Initiative. That's the whole essence of it, by the way. So I say this to you because so many people are so existentially dependent on food and energy from other countries, which that those supply chains can and will get severed. That, my friends, is why I keep endlessly ranting that you must take control of your own food, water, and energy, because there's a whole lot of countries that are importing a whole lot of food and energy. And you don't want to be in one of those countries when these lines get severed. So if you believe that there's some kind of like World War III, which, by the way, the World Economic Forum is already saying that we're at the beginning of it, by the way. The World Economic Forum's in day 3 or 4 today. And the big takeaway from World Economic Forum, one of the big takeaways, is we're in the beginnings of a World War III-like scenario, and it's the end of 50 years of globalization. That's, by the way, even World Economic Forum's main headline as a result of, if you read their kind of summary of the World Economic Forum 2022 annual meeting, it is, this is the end of globalization as we've known it. That's their summary. And they point to, if you had to summarize the common topic or point that's being made across all of the different panels and interviews, that's it. They're all saying the same thing. This is the end of globalization. 50 years of globalization is now screeching to a halt, grinding to a halt. And it's a soft way, by the way, that's a very politically convenient way of saying America and China are done. They're fully breaking up, but without naming names. So, but that, if you want to really get really honest about what that means by the end of 50 years of globalization, what you really mean is America is sick and tired of China's and Russia's bullshit. and we're taking our ball and our friends and going home. That's what's happening. And China and Russia are not going to like that. And they're going to retaliate. And there's going to be all kinds of crazy games going on with cyber attacks and supply chains. And we read the headlines yesterday, Russia filling up its ships with Ukrainian wheat, and all of this craziness is going to ensue. So this is why I've said many times over the past year, get control of your own water, food, and energy, and ideally move to a country that is a major food and energy exporter. Because that means that you have it domestically, that you're not importing it, which many, many countries are, unfortunately, importing a whole lot of food and energy. You don't want to be in one of those countries, ideally. And if you are, then you want to take extra care and consideration to take kind of sovereign control of your own water and food and energy if you happen to be in a place that's importing water, food, and energy. If you're in an exporter, it's not that critical, but you still should probably take that into serious consideration. Anyway, so that is precisely why I've said this, because it's not some crazy pie in the sky scenario, as you now see in May 2022. When I was saying these things May 2021, it was like, a bit of a stretch. Why is this guy so concerned about water, food, and energy? What's the big concern? It doesn't seem as crazy today as it did a year ago. It's going to seem a whole lot less crazy a year from now. I think it'll start to be a matter of hygiene that people start taking serious actions in these. And these are one of the things. The real problem is when these changes happen, as you saw with the toilet paper hoarding during COVID, when something that used to be ubiquitous it becomes scarce, people naturally hoard, and it gets very dark very quickly. And you don't want to be in that scenario, so don't let yourself get in that scenario. And if you do find yourself in that scenario and you're listening to my voice, it's your own fault. You fucked up. Own up to it. And as your child starves to death, say, you know what? Tyler was right.
I'm dying. I'm
Yeah,
weak.
but Tyler, you know what you're kind of missing is that most of the, quite frankly, a lot of the people who are on this call, all of us are probably relatively privileged that we can even be on this call. A good part of the world, I mean, they have trouble feeding themselves now. Okay, most people just can't get up and pick up and move to another country. Okay, I mean, and so you're talking about like a very small percentage of people. Okay, so this idea that the solution is everybody should move to Thailand or some country like that, no matter maybe the better solution is that we not start World War III. We're still going to have a climate change issue, but because yeah, I mean the vast majority of the world can't do. They're not in the position to do what you're suggesting, and so you're talking about an absolute complete calamity. Okay. And so I don't think we should be rooting for this to happen and figure out how to get to a different country. We should be figuring out how to mitigate the issue by not starting World War III.
Yeah, let me respond. So, being in Thailand as I am, we have a neighbor called Myanmar, aka Burma. We have, by the way, the Burmese on the scale of affluence and privilege. I challenge you to find somebody lower on that scale. Now, granted, they are neighbors of Thailand, but they have these people who have not even shoes, for whom having anything on their feet is considered a luxury, have no problem coming over to Thailand. And I think Americans it's not that Americans can't by the way, Americans don't really need to locate. America has a whole lot of its own water, food, and energy, by the way. So, I mean, Americans not a good example. I'm trying to think of what would be a good example. Who's really big on the importation of, maybe Canada. But my point is, it's relocating isn't a matter of convenience. When it's a matter of survival, you'd be surprised how economically possible it is. it's far more possible than people want to.
Or how creative you become in that space to make it
Correct.
work.
Yes,
But
you'll be so.
look at all the people trying to get into the United States from these Central American countries. They're trying to get in. Some
Right,
of them do get in, but
right,
it's not so easy to get in. Okay, and
right,
I mean, you just so yeah.
right. But a lot of the places that ideally that are ideally situated for the apocalypse uh, are not the most challenging to get into either. It's a lot of things around the equator. So um, America is a strange exception. America is kind of ideally situated for the apocalypse. It is incredibly difficult to get into. I'll grant you that. Um, but I think there's places that are even better to be in during the apocalypse than the U.S. But yeah, I take your point. It's incredibly inconvenient and out of the realm of um, I don't want to say it's out of the realm of possibility because I've seen how willing the Bangladeshis are and the Burmese and people who we're talking, $1,000 a year would be an incredible um, salary. And so when I have a hard time um, completely empathizing with my American brethren about the inconvenience factors of relocation. Having Burmese people who I employ and work with and live with, and watching how they function. Um, and they had a bit of an exile due to or diaspora or whatever refugee scenario of their own, which, by the way, the world was completely deaf to.
Looks like
Um,
Sylvester Stallone made a movie about it, right? That last Rambo movie
yeah,
featured Burma, so that was kind of the only mention of it in the news, as far as I was
I just mean
aware.
like I think I think it's great that the world is paying attention to the Ukrainian refugees, and there's a lot of refugee situations, but there's a ton of refugee situations going on around the world. Let's not forget, it was a month before, practically a month, like nearly a month, just before the Ukrainians were coming into Europe, particularly Poland, right, from Lviv into the eastern side of Poland, right? And they're crossing that border and they're being met with open arms and banners and signs and hugs and food and hot cocoa and anything, and endless, kind of outpouring of affection and support as the Ukrainians cross the border into Poland. How do we reconcile that with the fact that just 1 month prior to that, there was reports, and we watched videos, did we not, of 3,000 Afghani refugees trying to flee Afghanistan at the same fucking border. And the Polish military was there to make damn sure that not a single one of them got across. And they erected barbed wire fences that were spraying them with fucking water cannons. What the fuck is that about? Would someone like to take a stab at that one?
Racism.
Tyler, if I could, this is David. If I could make someone comment as well, I'm sensing, like just like you're talking about, that there's a much greater realignment going on. I've been working in Mexico quite a bit for the past 6 months, and I've been shocked at the number of Americans that I'm seeing going to Mexico, buying property in Mexico, getting locations to live in Mexico, if not moving outright to Mexico. And I'm talking about from the areas of Cancun all the way to smaller cities like Puebla or Mazatlan, all over the place. And I'm speaking about hundreds of Americans. Many of them are dyed in the wool, red-blooded Americans that are, football, apple pie, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, and they're fleeing the fucking country. They're like, screw this. I'm getting out of this place because I don't know what's happening. I'm seeing that quite a bit. Another side of that too is that I'm seeing quite a few people I know in the tech community, um, 30s, maybe up to early 40s, who are waiting for this to end. They're kind of like going, well, I'm glad. Well, I've got friends in Russia. I want to go back over there and visit. Or I look forward to some of this skirmish ending. And I'm talking to him, and I'm like, bro, this is the end. This is the end of a 40-year wave. You're not going back anywhere quick. This shit is. We're fundamentally systemic change here. You can kiss some of the travels you used to do goodbye, because we're going back to Cold War status. And I'm finding that there's a lot of people who are either recognizing it and going to Mexico or other places, people you wouldn't, or some of these people seem to have their head in the sand to what's really happening. So that's my take on it. Thanks.
I don't doubt it. There's going to be a
And
whole.
Tyler, I was going to add.
Yeah, go ahead, Mabwana.
I was going to add to that as well. Even here in Tanzania, there's been a migration from particularly Germany, because Germany used to colonize Tanzania, sort of pre World War II, World War One ish, and there's been an influx of Germans coming in who, in part are afraid of obviously the conflict in Europe and how that's going to spill over. And I have always known about Tanzania because they've maybe been traveling there, and or for holidays. But now there's a bit of a property boom here. People are buying around Kilimanjaro, but also the Swiss as well. Just like around the corner from me, a German restaurant opened up, and this is like a German doctor who's just packed up in Germany and just moved, bought a house and everything. And I'm getting people propositioning me saying, "Hey, can you help acquire land and get these people legal?" So I mean, can you imagine literally Europeans migrating to Africa again, or unless they're doing it in mass? The other thing I was thinking about as well is that there are going to be countries in the developed world where there might be a perception that they're slightly immune from some of the effects. For example, today someone was telling me that Tanzania is a wheat importer, but maybe is slightly immune because they can just substitute that, right, with other things. Sort of the average Tanzanian depends on wheat, but they can still grow, cassava, for instance, and just switch diets, which sounds a little bit naive, maybe that they could just do that overnight. But the main point is that then, you're not going to starve in Tanzania unless climate change impacts you. So you might migrate away from the rest of the world, Tanzania, thinking that things are great, but then you might get hit by climate change or something else. So just some interesting thoughts from this part of the world on that.
Okay.
Tyler, can I make a comment here, please?
Sure. Sure.
This is Pat, and I'm afraid my signal might be a little bit erratic because I'm not in a good reception area, but I hope I'll be able to get the whole point across. I thought the comment you made about the Afghanis who were trying to enter Europe using more or less the same route that Ukrainians did at the beginning of the war, that is really a very live issue and a very important one, I think, that we've been missing these last months, because there has been such a focus of attention on this horrible war in Ukraine that's been aggressive, etc., etc. But we have forgotten that there are other very difficult wars and situations from other parts of the world where people have been required to move, to go for safety or a better life or something like that. And these migrants from certain countries, global south countries, we might say, whatever you want to call it, who are not deemed to be maybe good enough to be refugees of a certain status, and therefore have very, very great difficulties finding their way in the global north or any more developed countries where they might stand a chance of making a living and being safe. It's going to be interesting. And you mentioned also at the World Economic Forum, I mean, there were some pieces and workshops, I think, that they had where they were discussing the refugees and a plan that would encourage the world to actually open up how refugees can be allowed to work in different countries, because we've got this problem with employment and job numbers and so on. But that was heavily structured towards the Ukrainian situation. No disrespect to anybody from Ukraine, but there are a whole lot of other refugees and asylum seekers from other parts of the world, and it really behoves us to think about why there seems to be a difference, and what are we going to do about that in the coming years as the world continues along this unsettled path. So I think we are going to be challenged by that, Tyler, even more than perhaps having our own food and water in our little patch of wherever it is, like yours, Thailand, that we can live and survive. It's going to be a little bit more about how we interact as different kinds of people on this one planet. Thank you. This is Pat, and I'm done.
That's a great point, Pat. If I may, I think I kind of was worried about this at the start of the Ukrainian conflict, that refugees that are in line right now may get pushed aside. And in fact, that's what's happened in Canada, where a lot of refugees from specifically Middle Eastern countries feel disenfranchised or left behind because they were already in line waiting to get support and all these things. And then all these Ukrainians get priority, but there's also conflict in the Middle East. So it feels almost like there's an element of racism. If at the very least it's accidental, it's still very unfortunate.
So I've got,
Well,
hold on, I got two articles here. And first of all, Pat, I like your point, but you, we both agree that this is you started off your point by saying that it's an important issue, this issue of the Afghanis at the Polish border versus the Ukrainians, and the different reception that they've received. Wildly different, wildly opposite. The And there's reasons for that. That's a whole clubhouse room all in of itself. But why is it that I've not heard anybody, not a single person, not a single headline, not a single nothing, tweet, nothing, Facebook post, nothing, TikTok, whatever, YouTube video, nada. I've seen nothing about precisely that point. If that is, why is, I would assume there would be more discussion about that issue as glaringly, you know.
Hey, Tyler.
Yes.
But it's not big enough for headline
In
news,
Sweden,
Tyler.
the far left is taking it up, but that's it. And it's very. I was also very surprised how little they discuss it. It's been brought up. The reason that you get from the like the center liberal right is that it's they're seen as Europeans who, like, the neighbors are helping their
Right.
neighbors basically.
Yep.
While if an Afghani's coming, it's like, well, you have neighbors, go to the neighbors kind of thing.
Right.
We would rather put money to help the neighbors help their neighbors,
Yep.
so developmental money
Yep.
instead. And so there's these like fast track employment for Ukrainians right now, even in the business that I'm working with, where you just basically just show up and they'll help you get jobs, while an Afghani, it's just really, really hard. Anyways.
So the link I pinned to the top of the room is from the Financial Times. The headline says, and this was from 2 days ago, the 23rd, 3 days ago. Business leaders warn that 3-decade era of globalization is ending. Executives and investors gather in Davos, depending on what part of the world you're from, to discuss mounting economic and financial challenges. And the photo is from the World Economic Forum. And by the way, what's interesting about that, it's this whole the concept of globalization and is embedded within the concept of the World Economic Forum. There is no institution that has been a bigger proponent of globalization than the World Economic Forum. And now the World Economic Forum, the biggest cheerleader for globalization, is now saying it's over. So just to give the kind of full context on how important that is, and here's the second one from the Washington Post from today, not even a day old yet. This came out today. Davos elite reassess globalization amid turmoil of pandemic and war. For more than 50 years, the World Economic Forum has celebrated globalization, but the pandemic, war, and tangled supply chains are challenging global decision makers. That's the headline. And then it raises the question, is globalization dead? Asks one of the 300 panels at the World Economic Forum's annual gathering this week. The verdict is complicated, but signs of a shifting world order and trepidation about exactly where things will land permeated the 5-day conference and its mainly champagne-filled soirees. There's real angst about globalization this year, says James Furman, an economist at Harvard University and former Obama advisor. Quote, I mean, there's always angst about globalization, but the big question this year is, how do you get out of any of this stuff? What's the end game of the China lockdowns or Russia's invasion in Ukraine? When will inflation go away? There's no obvious off-ramps for any of these problems.
Is it
Ju-
not just the structuring of globalization? We kind of see the importance of countries coming together, alliances like NATO. I mean, here in the US, our previous president wanted to actually get rid of the NATO because it was seen as useless. And now we see kind of the importance of NATO, and even more countries are joining that before never really took the risk in joining. And we see the importance with, getting the Iranian ship in Greece waters, of having points around the world that are crucial to keep power, basically, and then people moving to Africa. I mean, it's just a structure, and this happened throughout history. And the interesting thing is that it's always the same key point, that already Portugal back in time, that started kind of worldwide shipping industry of shipping tea to Europe, and being the first ones to have exchange with Japan, like making trades with Japan. That is always the same key points, right? It's around India. That's why, Spain paid Columbus to find an alternative way around India, because Goa was Portuguese back in time. Then it's around Greece down there. It's around the African point, and it's always very much the same key points that people try to get hold on since hundreds and hundreds of years. And I think it's just a restructuring. I don't think we will get around ever. Like, since modern culture started, we've been trading spices and all kinds of. It's a very sad existence, uh, living without spices, and not everywhere stuff grows. It was such a sad existence that people went on boats and knew and thought there were huge monsters in the ocean, and still went there to get spices. That's how sad living is without having like a global trade. So I don't think, I think it's just a restructuring as it happened before in the world.
But let me ask. I think one thing you're taking in my humble opinion, the wrong approach on this is that we've had 40 years, or at least since Glasnost and the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, we've had a breaking down of walls and a breaking down of divisions and reaching out in new engagement. What this is a realignment. It's putting the walls back up.
Right.
So the free trade, open trade that you're speaking of has produced a lot of peace, and we have moved to that area. But what we're doing now is redrawing those lines. And NATO is not opening up the world. NATO is saying this little small cluster of countries is going to wall themselves off from the rest of the world. And you better circle your wagons too, because we're going to come fuck with you if you fuck with us. That's what's happening. That's not peace and free trade and sharing each other's spices. That's saying you keep your spices over there. I'm keeping my spices. I'm going to grow my own spices and stay the fuck out.
Well,
It's
it was never peaceful. I mean, now it was peaceful for a few decades, but for hundreds of years there was international trade and nobody got along. But the traders, the people that were trading, still went ahead and did the trades. Like, no matter if you even go back to the knights that went to the Middle East to get the gold, nobody got along those trade lines. Like, they had to pay their way through. It will be more expensive as it used to be, but historically there was always worldwide trade. It was just more expensive because you had to pay your way through. So money, to make money, and it's always stronger than war. So it will just be expensive, and with a lot of different treaties and paying a lot of money along the borders. But it's unrealistic that there won't be any trade.
Well,
uh
it
we
won't be
have
great, but if we're closing McDonald's and closing Starbucks and pulling away from these countries, that's the opposite of that openness that you're speaking of. And I have an undergraduate degree in history, so I kind of get your point. But the issue is that what you're seeing happening right now is a pulling away from that openness. And I'll give you one anecdote that I was talking with some people earlier this week, and through some projects we do in the music tech industry. And many people that have invested in music catalogs and other such are downvaluing some of those catalogs that they put money into, or some of the intellectual property that's out there, because a lot of these for artists that had a global appeal. Many of these countries are getting shut off, or maybe some of the treaties won't be honored because of the conflict. So you can't collect royalties from intellectual property treaties in these countries if you're going to wall yourself off for them, or they wall us off. So a lot of the revenues that would flow back to artists through copyright is not going to happen. There's the licensing shows going on right now in Las Vegas, and the licensing industry, global brands that have developed. You won't be able to, monetize many of those that intellectual property. You can't have concerts in many of these countries now, for the time being anyway, maybe for a very long time. So there's a lot of fundamental change that's happening from the economic model that we've lived with for 30 years. And that's
Well,
really what.
isn't it just shifting though? Because we always had countries that didn't participate much in this. I mean, it was just countries we didn't care about. Let's say Angola. Angola, for example, never accepted any international trademark. So nobody really exported there, although they have a lot of riches. There were always countries that we just didn't care about because their buying power was just not interesting. Like there was just no interest in. There were always countries that didn't participate in this, and right now it's just a big shift again, and it will open up opportunities for other countries. I'm just saying the principle is not changing; it's just changing who the players are. But in principle, we will always trade internationally and have countries participating and others not for various reasons.
But
This time it's a
you're
they're
speaking.
aggressive.
It's far more simple than that. It's the world. The West perceived China as a massive opportunity, and now it sees it as a large liability. And it's pretty much as simple as that. It has nothing to do with Angola, by the way. I can assure you, it has everything to
No,
do.
I'm just saying, and I'm just saying this is just one example of a country
But
that
there's no
never
point in bringing up
participated
that example.
well.
That's like it's like
It's just
saying
an exception.
when we're talking about 9/11, towers collapsing. It's like, well, my cousin built a Lego house once and that collapsed. No, we don't need to talk about your Lego's cousin's house is collapsing when we're talking about the skyscrapers in Manhattan collapsing. What this is about is the U.S. is done with China. That's what it's as simple as that. We don't need to talk about Botswana or any other country that we don't care about. We were selfishly greedy, foaming at the mouth with opportunity over China in our own greedy, capitalistic, self-serving interests for the past 40 years. And now we've recalibrated and calculated and said, you know what? Fuck it, game over. Get the fuck away from us. We don't want you anymore. That's what's happening. And really nothing else
And
other than
now
that,
Apple is going to
really
India.
nothing else other than that is happening.
And now Apple is going to India. It's just opening
Correct.
opportunities for other countries.
That's
I'm just
fine.
saying the
Right.
principle is not
Right. Right.
changing. It's
But,
just
but,
the players are
but
changing.
focus
The
on where the
globalization
ball
stuff
is,
is not.
and not on focus on the soccer match that's being played, and not the one in your cousin's video game that he plays at home. The big game that's being played is this U.S. China issue. Watch that, and everything else will stem from that. And you're right. The headline of the Apple producing in India, and there's dozens and dozens. There's headlines happening every day that are second and third order effects of the main game, which is the U.S. China decoupling. And
But U.S.
when
China is global. It's just two players. It's just changing. The players are just changing. The
right,
principle itself
right,
is not changing.
right.
That's the thing
But
I'm saying.
nearly every headline we read, near maybe half of the headlines that I scan on a daily basis throughout Twitter, I can track back to the epicenter of the momentum of that is the U.S. China decoupling. Whether it's everything that's happening in Pakistan, a lot of what's happening in India, all of the. For example, how many times did we count the unicorns booming every week in India? That is precisely a second order effect of the China decoupling, by the way. Precisely. So, this is what I mean. A
But
huge percentage
Apple
of
is a good
everything
mover.
that's going on is the
If
U.S. China
Apple would
decoupling,
move
and
in
yet
the U.S.,
people aren't willing to acknowledge that that's the catalyst of what's happening. But when you
yeah,
start to look at the
but
full context of
Apple
all
moving back
from
to the
every
U.S.,
direction, then it becomes very
Apple
obvious
moving back
what's
to the U.S.
provoking this
No,
momentum.
But Apple is not moving back to the US. Apple is moving to India. So globalization still stands. It's just moving to a different country. If this would be true, that globalization is done, Apple would move to the US and everything would move back to the
Yes,
US.
you're
It's
right. It
not.
shouldn't.
It's
It
moving
shouldn't
back
be.
to
You're
other countries.
right. Yes, and that's why I'm saying the globalization isn't really the issue. The issue is the U.S. is done with China, and that's why when I say when the World Economic Forum and the public and mainstream media writes headlines that say it's the end of globalization, did I or did I not say what they're actually really saying? That's just a convenient cover for what they really want to say is that the U.S. is done with China, and you're right because it confuses people when they read the convenient euphemisms of it's the end of globalization. No, not really. It's not. It's the West, and which includes about 100 fucking countries that are all going to be doing business with each other, and India is going to be part of it. So you're right. People will be correctly confused by thinking it's the end of globalization. It's not. It's
Yeah,
a complete globalization, unfettered globalization is over because it's going to be everybody except China, Russia, and Iran, very notably, and a bunch of countries no one's ever heard of that are going to align with them.
Hey, Tyler, the other thing too is we've seen this before, and I agree with both what you and Katrina are saying. The only thing is looking forward, looking where the puck's going to go. We may be celebrating India today. 10, 15 years from now, we're going to go through the same thing with India. The minute they opt not to do what we want them to do,
Correct.
we'll go through this all again.
Correct.
Because we did it with Japan in the 70s and 80s, guys.
Correct.
We're going to go through all this again.
Correct.
But
That's
Tyler,
yeah.
I would just
But
add a
we're
different.
friendly
Oh,
with Japan. We're not very friendly with China, and we're also friendly with India and maybe Vietnam if that's
Make
the
no,
next place that we're
it's a
going.
great point, and then I'll get to LS. It's a very good point, which is America has been very aggressive with countries, specifically in the past. Japan and Germany come to mind, and yet where we stand today with them is, those are some of our strongest allies. It's I refuse to be pessimistic about the future of the potential camaraderie, for no pun intended, between China and the U.S. That in a change of leadership, it would have been hard to imagine, Germany changing leadership during World War II, but here we are today, and we're incredibly close. The same with Japan.
Yeah.
Hard to imagine when they're bombing Pearl Harbor that they're going to be one of our biggest allies. Yet here we are. I would love, and I refuse not to think that someday the U.S. and China will be on the same page, and I think that will be incredibly beautiful thing when we
Right.
get there. Yeah.
And
But
trust
before that can happen, China
global
needs to be to
system
democratize.
stable for hundreds of years only because of that, and that's why the other countries keep needing to shift their political leaders to align again with the US. That's the strength the US has, that it's a very stable political system for over 200 years, and that's what they in the end on the long run makes them win. And that's why it's so important that the US political system stays stable like this for the future, to basically in the end win again against and overcome these problems that they are having right now with China, in the past with Japan, and so on and so forth. Is this very stable political system that in the end, and strong capitalism that in the end will make them win.
So, can I ask a question, Tyler? If you look for the second and third order effects to begin sort of becoming metrics of the progress down this pathway of detachment, what are Amazon, Walmart, and other companies with huge dependence on
Great.
the Chinese economy? What are they doing? What do you see them doing today, and what will be the hallmarks
Yes.
of their capitulation?
De-risking as is the end. Cal has been more vocal about this than anybody. Best Buy, and he even said, you're going to start seeing Apple, and we just saw Starbucks yesterday. A lot of the companies that have the most exposure in China, like Apple and Starbucks, are in headlines today. 24 hours ago, one of the headlines I think I failed to share it, but somebody mentioned it briefly. I can find it in 2 seconds. But basically, Starbucks is starting to quote unquote de-risk its position in China, as is the term that's been coined, and it's the no. And so is Apple, as Katerina correctly points out. That headline was, again, it resurfaced 48 hours ago or whatever it was, and these companies that have over exposure to China are going to start lowering their exposure as quick as they can without drawing too much attention to it and pissing off China and the CCP, and they have to de-risk and de-risk and de-risk, and that means in whatever ways they can limit and kind of marginalize their exposure, they're going to start doing, and we are seeing that, and that's again why I point to that these articles that we read, so many of them are about this. In essence, this decoupling is the earthquake in the tectonic plate level, and then what you see is on the surface in the form of tsunamis and all kind of interesting behaviors. But my point is, don't make no mistake. What's causing a lot of these butterfly wing outcomes, the essence, the origins, and the genesis of it is essentially that the globalists are realizing that this whole vision that they dreamed up with China isn't going to go the way that they thought it would, and in fact, it's become just a little too clear that fantasy isn't going to mature into a reality or metabolize into some kind of Disney story with Uncle Xi hugging Joe Biden and going on honeymoon vacations together. In fact, he's doing that with Putin, and that's just, it is what it is. So it's not in our interest to empower them politically or economically or any other which way. And in fact, we even we're quite adamant about our reluctance to even meet with them without very strict conditions. By the way, Zelensky just upgraded. This is really interesting. Yesterday there was a headline we didn't read. We probably should have. That Zelensky is now saying, and this is genius, by the way. Putin previously, in the earlier days and weeks of this of the Russian invasion, constantly was saying, "Well, the red carpet's right here to talk. Let's have talks. Let's have conversations." And of course, that is a tactic that Putin is well known for using, where he just wants to. If you aren't willing to engage in the talks, you appear as the bad person, and he appears as the good person because he's so willing to have tea with you. And Zelensky realizes that that's a game and a strategy that Putin's one of his trademark maneuvers. So it's a tricky situation because you have to invest a lot of resources into participating in these endless talks that really go nowhere. So Zelensky yesterday says, happy to talk with you anytime, face to fucking face. Me to you, no one in between. And guess what Putin will absolutely refuse to do? Me face to face. Right. Genius move. By the way, I like to imagine that it was the U.S. who suggested that to him, because essentially we're doing the same thing to China. We've been doing the same thing to China for a while, because China keeps wanting to meet with the U.S. endlessly. And the U.S. is like, yeah, we don't really see much interest in meeting with you, honestly. And, you have to make conditions on this. And I thought that was a genius maneuver by Zelensky yesterday. And nobody covered it. Somebody did. I read the headline. But that's a really interesting move, because it will stop Putin from it'll neutralize that entire strategy, because now Putin will be embarrassed to suggest, oh, well, let's go to the negotiating table. No, you know what the response is going to be. We made it very public, yesterday. From here on out.
Tyler, it's possible if Putin would do it if there is a table that is at least 200 kilometers long.
Right. Yeah.
So Tyler, you mentioned.
I just want to remind you where you are on the clock in case you want to do anything else today
All right.
besides
All right.
global.
Thank you. Here we go.
The curvature of the Earth will pay in at the 200 kilometers mark, so they're still not going to be being able to being face to face at that point.
Okay, here we go. Here we.
Tyler, can I just add one little tiny comment about globalization again
Yeah.
to end it on a positive note?
Okay.
The idea that globalization, as it was, is being challenged by the media at the moment is interesting because actually, what Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, said in his closing remarks at the World Economic Forum today was he's actually promoting the world to adopt a more sustainable, resilient kind of globalization that uses natural resources sparingly and, above all, takes the needs of future generations into account. Yes, this could be a whole lot of PR spin and all the rest of it, but it's like he's calling for a new approach to globalization that recognizes, quote unquote, the need to reduce strategic dependencies and addresses the needs of the global south.
Okay. Love it.
Deglobalization will not work, he says, but thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so Tyler, you got big news. I'll give you the top. What I see as three
Okay.
top 10 headlines. You got the VMware thing. You got news on Snowflake because they're basically guiding down. So even though tech stocks generally up there, Snowflake is, which it's a big cloud computing company. They're down sharply today. And the third story is a whole bunch of stories with Twitter. And so you probably have some of them, but if you don't, let me know.
Give us your favorite.
Well, my favorite is that Elon's reworked the financial part of it, so he's going to be putting up more equity, or he's found equity. He's not going to have to use a margin loan, so that should take pressure off Tesla stock. And I think this deal is going to get done, maybe somewhat at a lower number, but he's going to figure out how to close this deal. And there's also news, which he's still like throwing bombs at them though, because there's something. I guess Twitter paid a fine of over $100 million for. I'm trying to remember what it is now, but he's making it sound like it's new, and it was actually disclosed since 2019. I'm trying to remember what this fine is. Yeah, there was something with customers or something, and I just like my whole train of thought just got like blown away today. But I'm going to find it in 2 seconds. Yeah, Twitter agrees to pay millions in fines if the U.S. government alleges privacy violations. But I think that was actually disclosed a couple of years ago, so they just settled on what the number is on the fines. Okay. So that's what I would. And I think Twitter stock is up a little bit because I think there's a better perception now that the deal will close at at some number as opposed to him walking away. Um,
Hey
and
Ken, I've got a
this,
couple thoughts on that. Or
yeah,
are you
go
done?
ahead.
Sorry. Well, it raises two questions. So this is Matt. Raises a couple observations. First of all, on the Twitter deal, I agree. From my point of view, it seems like it's been a roller coaster ride, but the likelihood that it's going to go through as of today seems more likely than the past. What I think is interesting about that is that once it's audited, right, privately, publicly, constructively or not, if you take all the ad-supported chatbot false accounts out of the equation, it's not just a revaluation for Twitter. It is a broad-based, and Tyler, I'd love to get your feedback on this because I know you've been with a lot of the founders since day one. If you take that ad-supported base and don't extract it just from Twitter, but extract it from MENA, extract it from all these different platforms because we were just kind of in it and everybody knew we were doing it. If you take that ad spend out, the brand spend in terms of how they're going to spend their money on advertising is going to be contracted. And I wonder if what we're seeing within Twitter is hinting at a broad-based valuation reset of software and platforms. And that's just, I'll close on that comment. And then
You
on
just
your
got
other
to just
comment,
look at Snap stock to go to see
exactly.
that
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
revaluation.
So I mean, I think we're I don't think it's just started. I think we're like in the first inning or the second inning of watching the rest of these platforms be revalued. And the question that I don't know that hopefully this community knows is to what degree or what extent on a percentage basis is there a false audience or a chatbot that's mimicking engagement that is not real, that will become unearthed, message back to the brands across tech and all enterprises, and have a second leg down on these. Or, alternatively, not the sky's falling, is there a course correction that some platforms have the ability to take, and others where there's lack of trust, like with Meta or Facebook, that we just don't believe in, and they're going to fall faster, and they're going to have to come back quicker. That's my final point.
Cynical.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah,
Yeah, could I
No,
ask
no,
a
I'm actually not, Tyler, because what you
I
what
know.
you what you
I'm
shared,
joking with you. Yeah.
you're the one that's saying the sky's falling. We have to go to Tyler. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. And you're not exaggerating. You're making a good point that we all need to understand on a relative basis, based on where we live, kids' ability to move. And I think that point was made earlier. But no, not cynical at all. It's just saying, hey, if this is a widespread issue, and we know it is because it's already affected the valuation. Like, I guess the question is not cynical. How much further does it go, or what are the tools to recorrect? And to your earlier point, Tyler, about you were sitting in these rooms with Jason and other founders, and I think you made the point a couple weeks ago that this was never in their mind when they founded their company to take
Correct.
over the world and do good. Right. So I'm trying to balance your viewpoint and the current market viewpoint to say where do we go from here? And everybody knows that you're probably have a lot different exposures and perspectives on this. So I thought it'd be good to discuss. In addition to hardware companies becoming software companies with the Broadcom announcement, we can tackle that one later.
Yeah. Yep.
quick question? Is there any chance there's lots of sort of force majeures operative in this whole drama around Twitter, but is one possible intended consequence that those people not aligned with Elon's view of the world will have a much bigger incentive and opportunity to leave the company before he takes over and has to fire them?
He already did, no?
You mean Jack Dorsey?
Well,
No, I'm talking about all the people that are have been at Twitter for years who are really, really, really opposed to the Musk takeover.
Are you talking about the communists, John? The communists? The commies from that undercover piece?
Is that Eric?
Many of
You
them already
you're very
left.
muffled,
They had
Eric.
a big exit of their senior leadership team when the
Yes.
announcement was first made.
I think about at least two already, head of product or something.
But that too seems to be forced and not voluntarily.
After.
We ready? I think we did the big. We did the air horn, did we not? If not,
Yes,
there
we
we
did.
go. There we
Air
go.
Yes, we did.
horn.
It's a two air
Again,
horn.
yes.
Yeah, version today. It's a special Thursday two air horn edition. So,
But I would love your feedback on that, just even if it's 30 seconds, Tyler.
give me the sharp, succinct version
Yeah,
of.
just the one sentence version is if there's let's just call chatbots. If there are chatbots that are interacting and misrepresenting engagement and dollars spent by advertisers, and it's being audited to whatever it is, 5, 20, or 50% of Twitter's traffic, if that becomes a root cause issue in the industry and software and platforms, how much further does it have, downside reset, and what can they do about it to right the ship? Because you can already see some of these tech platform companies saying,
You know
well,
what?
we're going to govern that.
You know what kills me about that question? My biggest recommendation in those early meetings that I had with Twitter founders, and this was specifically at Evan Biz. I didn't say it to Jack directly, but I said it to Evan Biz. The company was 20-ish people at the time. I was adamant about you have to do identity verification. And there was no identity verification at the time. There weren't even really celebrities on the platform at that time, and it stuns me how I'm selfishly saying, but how I feel like I was very right. I'm surprised how right I was about that at that time. I would love to see what Twitter could have, should have, would have been if it had implemented that at the kind of beginning. It would. I wonder what Twitter would be today with zero bots, with everybody identified. And that doesn't mean that you couldn't be anonymous. I mean, you could be anonymous. You could have a name and an avatar that aren't reflective of your true identity, but the platform sure knows who you are. And so I'm not, but maybe not. Maybe the platform decides that they are going to show your true identity. So but I don't know. But my point is that in either case, you wouldn't have bots at all. And it's funny to think
Well,
now.
wait a minute. Wait a
Yes.
minute, Tyler.
Yeah.
Facebook insisted on true identity,
Yeah.
and Facebook has bots.
Okay. So they were. Yeah. Systems can be defeated. I guess is the
So
point.
what difference? Yeah, I mean, the difference between Twitter and Facebook was that Twitter wanted anonymity because of things like Arab Spring and people
Right.
from non freedom of speech cultures.
Right.
It was very idealistic, but
Right.
Facebook has the same kind of fake traffic or more.
Yeah.
But Facebook's never really actually enforced that. I mean, like this, it wasn't like you had to go like upload a driver's license to get a Facebook account. So you
Right.
could,
Yeah,
They
LinkedIn
had
does.
lightweight authentication.
Yeah, the
Right,
place still
LinkedIn does that if
If
they
you want
think
to
you're a
do
fake.
business on Facebook, you need to provide your true ID. So I think Facebook provides the both method to keep this flexibility.
Yeah, what LinkedIn will do is if they suspect you're a bot, they'll freeze your account and ask you to upload your ID to verify who you are. You can blame some of this on me way back when I did the Robin Sage stuff right before the Arab Spring in 2010. But then I also did a ton of bots before. But the question is, are bots being run by the Twitter itself for marketing budget, or is it run by, say, your competitor? Okay, to burn up your marketing budget. Because I remember when I was testing this out, remember when they had Yahoo Pipes? I was able to
Yep.
automate conversations using Yahoo Pipes on Twitter, and it was just all different platforms like that. Like I can run 2,800 accounts off of numerous Hootsuite accounts,
Hmm.
things as simple as that. And
Okay.
then it took about 400 accounts to become trending. Now it takes about 4,800 accounts.
I didn't answer Matt's question at all, but to kind of more directly answer your question, it totally depends on the percentage of bots because you gave even yourself quite a wide range of numbers, and you it depends how much above or below the expectation. I think people could stomach anything in the single digits, and when you start getting into double digits, and certainly anything over 20, then oh my god, shit's hitting the fan. It's fundamentally different than
Yeah.
we'd assume. And to Tom's rather good point, whose bots are they? Is it because if it turns out that they're Twitters, then oh my god, that's just like an explosion on the Titanic. If because it would be bad behavior essentially. Which, by the way, there's been um,
It would be
Silicon.
fraud.
It would be fraud and startups. That is the type. Generally, Silicon Valley is rather well behaved as an industry, but that would be its Achilles heel, which is it does take a little bit of liberties of sort of softly automating behaviors that Airbnb sucked in all of the Craigslist listings for an automated pinging the owners and said, hey, what we listed your thing on Airbnb on our platform and just click here to like we did all the heavy lifting for you. Uber, from what I understand, did a couple of clever things. Uber and Lyft both did quite a bit of automation bot activities towards each other in terms of booking rides and canceling rides. 1 second before the free termination point. At scale, millions. And there's all kinds of kind of these automated bottish behaviors that hackers have been using as strategies that was kind of considered kosher in Silicon Valley culture, not really considered fraud, kind of dancing that line. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that a social network would implement a sort of automation strategy to make things appear more engaging, for lack of a better word. But I honestly don't think that's the case. I'm just adding some historical context. But I think,
Hey, Tyler,
yeah,
this is Robert. Real
yeah.
quick from a brand manufacturer side, having reviewed data or allocating budgets for ads, advertising, things like that. If there are a high percentage of whatever, fake accounts, bots, whatever you want to call it, you all understand it, but those in the legacy businesses are going to start questioning, why are we spending what we have been spending and making decisions off of the data that these organizations have been giving us, the metrics back? Can we really trust it? Should we be spending at these levels?
Right.
And did we make the right decisions in the past? I would not be surprised if this stuff turns out to be really bad, and especially if certain brands have struggled, or they may view that they have overpaid. And that would be very interesting if you get a series of people who felt they overpaid and start reaching back out of revenge in lawsuits.
But
No,
what I
it's not even
believe is
that.
that they
It's not.
don't know. How they measure is by conversion percentage. And so if your ad gets a, a 6% conversion rate somewhere else and a 2% conversion rate on Twitter, they'll stop allocating budget to Twitter. They won't look into it any deeper than that,
I
Robert.
dealt with conversion rates my whole career. All I'm talking about is whoever's producing the information, if we do not trust the source of it, then we rethink everything. I get all that stuff. That's what I'm talking
Yeah, you're right.
So I have a question. I don't know if it's a stupid one. I could totally see Nicholas jumping in, being decentralization and owning your own data. But you kind of see these things where these companies get penalized. But when you think about it, it's users that got affected, maybe advertisers, and they're I think it's like, what was the settlement? 150 million. Who gets that money? You know what I mean? Does the government just pocket it and be like, great, okay, so the people that actually was a part of the damages get nothing?
Well, the lawyers typically take their 30%, and
What
then
about the remaining?
I'm not a lawyer, but I mean that typically that judgment goes back to the class action lawsuit or the individual or individuals that were harmed. Typically in this sense of corporation. If you're in retail and you didn't get reach and you had supply chain shortages, per the previously mentioned comments around Myanmar and China and the alliances, I mean, that you could make a case, but I agree with you. It tends to be, probably pennies on the dollar of loss.
Okay.
Yeah,
We
affected 140. Sorry, keep going. My bad.
No, we're going to get into the top stories here. So what we got here today is number one from the Wall Street Journal. Apple is going to raise the hourly pay for U.S. workers. I assume at the Apple Store to $22 per hour, up 45% from where it was 4 years ago. Amid inflation and unionization push, U.S. starting salaries are also expected to rise. There's a daughter article by Vice. It says they have a leaked video of Apple senior vice president of retail and people named Deidre O'Brien telling employees that joining a union would make it harder for Apple to improve working conditions. In an internal video circulating among Apple's 58,000 retail employees, Apple's vice president of retail suggests that a union would make improving conditions more difficult. The next big topic.
Keller, before you move on
Yep.
from Apple,
Yep.
this is not exactly news. This is just a well-reported rumor that's been in 5 publications today. There's rumors that Apple may buy Electronic Arts. I just wanted to point it out.
Oh, interesting.
EA?
Yeah.
about.
I'll,
EA Sports. It's in Apple.
I'll explain why. The game, there's a massive buyouts going on in the video game space. Video game studios are being bought up like crazy. And the reason I believe, and the experts I've spoken to agree with my reasoning because I've asked them, is because the future of the metaverse, the people who actually have the most hands-on experience with designing what is likely to be the future of the metaverse is the game studio creators. Because basically, the metaverse is going to be a bigger, better embodied spatial version of a video game, essentially. Right? When you think about it. And in fact, to make that point even much more clear, the tools that you'll use to build the metaverse to a certain degree will be built using the same platforms that they use today to build the video games, namely Unity and Unreal Engine. What are the what it's Unity?
UE5 and Unity, yeah. Well, just
Yes.
Unreal
Epic.
Engine and Unity are the
Unreal
main two, yeah.
yeah.
So my point is why if you have interest as a company in the future of the metaverse, and I got a big newsflash for you, Apple does. Then you're going to want to have the best of breed video game studio talent under your umbrella. And so now it's not, because you're going to be able to do all kinds of interesting things above and beyond the video games. And the video game having the talent of the skill set of knowing how to build environments in Unity or Unreal Engine 5 is going to be an incredibly valuable skill set to have as we move into the metaverse, because the metaverse essentially, it used to be that the internet that we use today on our laptops and phones was coded in lines of code, right? JavaScript most notably. And a lot of what you're doing on the internet is a whole bunch of people sharing pieces of JavaScript code that they get from Stack Overflow, essentially. So the future of the metaverse is people designing in Unity and Unreal Engine. And so it's a whole different skill. And those people are the new environment developers. And they're going to be very valuable. And there's a limited supply of them. And they're getting sucked up everywhere at the moment. The Ernst & Young, by the way, in Scandinavia is enabling a whole lot of these mega roll-ups and buyouts that are occurring of these game studios. So to me, I said, I believe that's what was going on. And I asked them that because they're kind of operating as a sort of broker in those deals. And they said, yeah, that's exactly why they're buying those companies. So Apple wanting to buy something like EA, to me, makes perfect sense. And I bet they would love to announce that at Worldwide the WWDC, which is what, in 2 weeks?
That's correct. And they've been hinting that they have an announcement that'll blow our socks off. So
June,
I agree
June
with you there.
June 6th to 10th. So we're talking 10 days away from Apple's biggest developer event of the year. And to them, the Worldwide Developer Conference, WWDC, which traditionally always takes place at the Moscone Center there in downtown San Francisco, right there by the Yerba Buena Park. Well, now it takes place at the mothership, pun intended, although I think that's what they might call it. And although I don't know, WWDC is going to be virtual this year or partial virtual. I don't know, but anyway, the point is that this flagship developer event, Worldwide Developer Conference, the very concept of the developer is fundamentally changing as we go into the metaverse. It used to be JavaScripting to make web pages, then it became app developers, and now it's going to become metaverse environment builders, which is using what was traditionally the origins of video game development. So if Apple can announce something that they're buying EA, that in the same way that Facebook needed to show like a big grandiose gesture about their sincere motives and intent around committing to the metaverse, well, rebranding your goddamn company is one way to do it. And that big 90-minute video they produced, it was also quite impressive. But buying one of the biggest video game conglomerates is certainly would be an Apple-like, I think, an even better grandiose maneuver. So, yeah, was that May jumping in?
So it's Dr. Friend. I have a question for you. I could, because I think that the real future is going to be in AI. And, I can build an Unreal 5, but if 5 years from now I can say, make me a mountainous terrain with a river running through it and a
Oh,
bunch of
right.
pine.
Yes. I know where you're going. Yeah, you're talking about Dolly 2 and the new Google one that they just announced, and
Exactly.
you're right. And as I said, I think 48 hours ago in this very program, that this is why this is so mind blowing. That the Dolly, the reason that Google felt it necessary to make a preemptive announcement 2 days ago that they have their own version of Dolly 2 is because that is potentially the beginnings of breaking all the barriers and boundaries and dissolving all of the friction between and enabling almost anybody to become a metaverse architect or environment builder, because then you don't need to dedicate many months and in some cases years to learning how to build inside of Unity or Unreal Engine 5 or whatever, because in Dolly 2 today you say, show me a porcupine swimming upstream in the likes of name your favorite oil painter, or in a photorealistic, or in any kind of aesthetic trope you can imagine, in Baroque, Renaissance style, or in postmodern, whatever. And that is a 2D image today, but that is the power of that can be rather, it's not that big of a jump to extrapolate that from what I understand. This is conjecture on my part, but I have to imagine that it's already done the bulk of the heavy lifting in its ability to generate the 2D image. I don't know that it would be that more difficult to generate a 3D environment based on the text or vocal description.
I would say that it's actually easier because you know the spatial coordinates precisely,
With
kind
the
of like how with the drone that recently fought the fighter pilot. The drone had perfect knowledge of the position, whereas the fighter pilot had what humans could perceive. So in the same way here, I want to put a desk somewhere. Well, I have hundreds of models of desks. Which one? Let's just run through a few of them. How big is the person? It actually becomes easier with something like augmented reality or virtual reality, where you have a person that is embodied because of the spatial nature of the very question that you're asking.
Right. Yeah, you have an object. When you say, make me a porcupine, doing this, well, the porcupine becomes an object in a 3D environment is almost easier than to make it the object in the 2D environment in a way, yeah. And they're already doing renderings on the back sides of things based on the front sides. If the front side is the 2D image, there's already really clever AIs that render the backside of objects based on the front side. So the technologies are there, and the things are lining up. And this is why it gets so crazy, because that is essentially the Star Trek holodeck, the ability to utter anything and have it metabolize in front of you. But it also is the grand vision of, again, dissolving all the boundaries and barriers between the creator and the creation. And there was always been this massive friction in technology between being a creator and the creations. But we've technology has been nothing but the constant removal of the middlemen and middle steps between that grand vision of just uttering what you want to say and having it metabolize in three-dimensional metaverse in front of you. And now we can almost, this conversation is essentially the light at the end of that tunnel, where Fran's right. I think within a few years, I don't see why we wouldn't have that happen, where you're going to create metaverse based on sort of descriptions. And you could even say, the real trick will be when you're able to reference prior points of reference, meaning image detection is building libraries of every object. So when you say to the AI, a 1969, Ferrari GTO, it knows what that object is. It's seen it a million times, and it's seen every
probably an art student who made it and posted it on Sketchfab along with 50 other versions of that car. So
this is my point: is the AI, and this to me is one of the most profound happenings in technology, and most civilians or pedestrians are kind of unawares of it, is that the AI is becoming literally as we speak. There was an article yesterday, again, another one that we probably should have got into and we didn't, about the Google's claiming it has an AI that's in tests proving to be of human intelligence. So what is happening is the object detection algorithm is able to detect. There's apps for plants that tell you what kind of plant it is, and there's objects. You can find any shoe ever made. Just by searching for the shoe, and it'll show you all of the object of the shoe is understood. The Nike Jordan first edition is well understood by the algorithm. It knows that object. It's tagged, very thoroughly, and it can distinguish the very fine difference between the subtle changes that happen from year one to year two, just as any real expert on the topic would be. And it's
Could I go ahead?
yeah. But my point is
Well,
once the AI knows nearly every object you can label verbally, so that you could say, show me a MacBook Pro 2015 15-inch in 3D rendered space, bada boom, bada bing, it could do it perfectly. And okay, now show me this and that. Show me a Persian pickle. It knows what a Persian pickle looks like from every 3D rendered angle. Okay, fine. Okay, now magnify it 5 times the normal size. Okay, now make it pink. Okay, great. Now put the pickle on top of the MacBook. Okay, and we're very close to that reality where every object you can think of, the algorithm is intuitively familiar with, and that's going to enable this kind of holodeck-like experience of building, verbally or via text in a way with an endless library of objects that are on demand. John?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the term library, because I was going to say, I mean, this is the next in the natural progression of RPCs, DLLs, OOPs, modularity, OpenAI, and now Open Metaverse. I mean, this is just utterly inexorable, predictable. And the interesting thing is that on the human side, if you look at how boy bands have been constructed, like K-pop, and how they look at what are the hooks, and you know this better than anybody, Tyler, because you're in the biz. But what are the hooks? How often do you put them in? How do you assemble an ecosystem of personalities that appeal to everybody? I mean, those kind of human factors can be programmed in with the AI as well. So when you do the overlay of the human client of this technology on top of the modularity and the libraries, it's absolutely inevitable. And one of the things that conclusion that I reached about 6 or 7 years ago is that the software developers of the future are going to be relatively few, in that they'll be building the Gatos, Google's new human level intelligence claim. They'll be managing the Gatos, but everybody else will be talking into the microphone and telling Gato what to do.
Is that what they have a name for that human level intelligence project?
Yeah, it's Gato, Gato.
Like a cat. Oh, that's funny. Wonder what the pun is there. Okay. So the next big topic is grid Twitter.
I just have a quick
So,
question, Tyler.
oh,
Hi,
Yeah,
this is Emma. I'm
hey.
sorry. It hit me. I would love to know what you think about, since AI is getting so smart, they will be able to, do all kinds of art and you name it. I mean, they already can. What will result for people like me that is, at least, I mean, I'm an artist and a designer, and I especially draw cartoons and things like that. Will that mean that my art will be less valuable or more valuable because it's more, I don't know, real? What do you think will be the outcome for artists?
As an illustrator,
Yeah, well, yeah, artists in general, exactly, like illustrators and yeah, the people that, well, all kinds of artists, really. I mean, you can really generate anything.
My first thought, just to be clear, I don't know. It's going to be. This is truly one of the more. That's a fascinating question, and an important question. The thought that goes through my mind is the more unique your style is, the more protected you are. So if by the way, most artists' styles are rather derivative, and even many of my favorite artists' styles. And I'm thinking like James Taylor, the musician, who I adore, who I was raised on, who it's in that those songs are in my fucking bones, right? However, he was very directly inspired by a handful of other, musicians, right? And so the progress of music evolution and fashion evolution, two industries I've had a personal professional hand in, is in, and even cuisine is in, and illustrations is generally, I think we would all agree, as creators of different types, regardless of your art form, even poems, even literature, it doesn't matter. It's been an incremental step of regurgitation from, predecessors, right? That's just how things have evolved. It's been very rare in any art form, pick it, painting, although oil painting might be the most interesting when you had, what was the most radical departure from, because there is a history in oil painting of like intentionally trying to fuck with who came before you and doing exactly the opposite. I mean, God bless the oil painters for their, wanting to totally stick it to the man, and take completely zig when everyone else is zagging, right? Like the Dadaists and whatever. So the Italian futurists, there's quite a long list of them. But musicians generally only did that in a limited scope, meaning the punks was a reaction to disco. Okay, fine. But still, even within punk, it was, Black Flag was directly influenced by whoever, Fugazi was directly inspired by whoever, and the Sex Pistols were directly, where it was regurgitation after regurgitation after regurgitation. And generally, every song that you hear today is, you can trace back the origins, almost like a family tree, of where that came from. And it's, by the way, it comes back to generally the blues in the case of modern pop music. But the same can be done in literature. The same can be done in, nearly every art form. So my point is this. It's a long way of answering your question. The more radical departure you are as an illustrator from the family tree of illustrators, the better you'll be, because you'll have this very signature, identifiable style that if anyone tries to ape, hopefully the legislators will protect you, although I wouldn't count on it. Because if you're just part of the natural regurgitation of slightly better, grilled cheese sandwiches, there's no ability for you to claim any kind of intellectual property of that grilled cheese sandwich or chicken wing in of creativity, of this endless waterfall of creativity, because everyone's going to have access to on-demand libraries of show me a grilled cheese sandwich. And if you have an illustrative style, that's wildly signature, and I'm trying to think of the artists who are remarkably unique in their in their own creative languages.
Peoples.
Yeah, I mean, digitally today, Beeple is quite unique. I'm just thinking classically of all art forms and all artists, people who really, really jumped out ahead of the pack.
Dwarf, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there are many, and we correctly celebrate many of them. Although tragically, I'll bet there's a thousand times more that we never got to hear of because it was just too radical at the time. But my point is to answer Emma's question is like, if you are like 99.9% of artists in all art forms, generally regurgitative of your contemporaries, I think you might be in a pickle. And so you might want to strive to be wildly radical and identifiable in your creativity.
That's interesting
yeah,
because I thought,
can I reference Amara's law? And Roy Amara was head of Institute for the Future, and he said that futurists tend to overestimate how quickly new technologies will be disruptive, but woefully underestimate the ultimate impact. So I think the question we're debating right now is, what's the future of an artist? is one of those underestimating the ultimate impact that it could become very profoundly repressive of anyone but the leading artists that set the trends. And the other thing is that throughout the history of art, and I'm not an art historian, but one of the ways to make your mark is to use a new medium, and people have acquired lasting reputations by the introduction of a new medium. So there's likely to be a counterpart in the digital world where how you use the new digital medium with new digital tools in your construction of art is probably going to be one of the sources of differentiation of those who do survive the AI impact on the art world.
So,
I see it on the opposite end. I think that the digital space will, I think that yes, their art now seems to be more cookie cutter, but I see the digital space as a way to respond to that because it'll provide a platform for those who are a bit more unique to shine a bit brightly. And you'll see a convergence of interest there rather than the cookie cutter, which is why my response to you is more. This will create more space and opportunities for true artists.
I actually agree with that. I have to say, no one knows what's gonna happen, but I think that if it gets easier for people to get more generic art or like whether it's cartoons and stuff like that, then it will be kind of like with the in the fashion industry, how vintage still is something that is very like everyone want to find a nice vintage. Well, at least I do. Piece to wear, whether it's a purse or something else, right? Is kind of is gained in value, at least a lot of my things, right? So I think I hope at least the same can go for art, but definitely how an artist work and what kind of assignments, that's probably going to change because a lot of, for example, games and game developers are probably going to go with the cheaper alternative, which is definitely going to be AI.
So I just want to clarify. I don't think what you were saying is at all at odds with what I was proposing. I think it will provide new opportunities for truly unique artists to leave their mark in the world, but for those that Tyler referred to as sort of, copying their contemporaries, I think that's the majority of people in art in terms of numbers that will have to struggle more, even though there may be more true original artists. The second and third tier artists I think, are going to have a much harder time. Is that what you were proposing, Tyler?
Yeah, just that you're right. I mean, I left that whole other piece of the puzzle out, which is that this is going to create a Cambrian explosion of technology. I'm sorry, of innovation, of creativity, rather. And the question is, when creativity becomes commoditized, because you're going to have every Tom, Dick, and Harry endlessly creative, right? Everybody's Kanye all of a sudden, right? When you have 1 billion Kanyes, what becomes valuable? Because the creativity itself is commoditized. It's going to be challenging to become notable in that environment. And that itself is going to become the new art form, is in becoming recognizably or in having an artistic identity itself is going to be very challenging in that environment. So that's what I imagine will be perceived of as valuable when creativity itself is commoditized by technology.
If everyone is Kanye, then Pete Davidson's of the world will stand out. So.
Okay, so the next topic is a great question, by the way. So Twitter agrees to pay $150 million to the FTC. I think we covered that, right? Settling allegations that it misrepresented the security and privacy of user data between 2013 and 2019. And the next is that, as Ken correctly said, Broadcom announces plans to acquire VMware for around just a measly $61 billion in cash and stock, paying $142 per share, and will assume the $8 billion in debt that VMware had.
Yeah,
Um,
Tyler, let me make a couple of extra points on this. I believe, and I haven't looked into the detail because all of this happened this morning. I got so many things going on, but I think there's like a 30-day or 40-day shop agreement. So, Michael Dell and Silver Lake basically control. Hold on a second. Yeah, I just had a call come in. Yeah, they basically control VMware. You can still hear me, right?
yep.
Okay. And I think they've got a 30, 40-day shop agreement where they can shop around to a higher bidder. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a higher bidder, but they do have that. And I think there might be some antitrust issues here, even though
Yep.
it's not a horizontal merger, but the FTC's been looking at Broadcom even before this for some non-competitive things within the chip industry. And, it's a very aggressive, more aggressive FTC than we've had in the past. So I mean, look out for that as well. And I'm done speaking.
There's a lot of companies that rely on VMware as well for within development and whatnot. But not only their virtualization, but their cloud connectivity, the network connectivity adapters that they offer, which is part of the reason why Broadcom is interested, because a lot of those services are relied on, both paid and unpaid, and they have a habit, Broadcom, of absorbing, like we saw with Symantec, absorbing a company that has a free offering, and then basically paid only, and ultimately, I mean, with Symantec, it died. So personally, I'm hoping this doesn't go through.
Okay, Carl, it seemed like you were wanting to jump in on the future of creativity topic.
I don't want to pull the conversation, but I had some thoughts on it. But I don't. I mean, I can summarize it very quickly if
Go
you
ahead.
want to give me the space.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just surprised that. So, it's very easy to look into the past and see all of these great painters and examples of innovation. Your Rembrandt and Pollock and Monet and those kind of people. Dali. But that was low hanging fruit, as in every time that a new style of doing something is discovered, it makes the pool of possibilities even infinitely less. And it means that every time there's innovation, it has to be succinctly more granular. Like Dali's paintings were so just mind shockingly a culture explosion, that of course it was always going to be successful. But now we're at this point where you were saying, Tyler, that how do there aren't 1,000 Kanye's. I would argue there are. I would argue there's probably 1 million people in the world right now who can rap just as well as Kanye can, who
How
can
dare
put
you?
together lyrics as sick as he can. What he had was timing. I mean, that's what we're in now. Now that we're at this point with internet connectivity, and you can discover any kind of content at any point, and you can make an infinite amount of content in a very short amount of time. It's timing. It's who do you know? What do you know? Where are you pushing your stuff? What is your network like? So that's where I think AI is going to help, because there is no question among the fact that AI is going to be more creative than humans eventually. Simply mathematics. An AI will be able to sit there and just run through every possible connotation and style and everything else and pump out 1 million paintings an hour. So where the AI is going to be useful, I think, with creativity is actually working with it, validating your work through an AI. The AI will guide you potentially to trends. It's like, well, you like painting this style, but if you want to potentially be financially successful, then maybe change it slightly to this style and then approach these markets. So you could actually work with a creativity AI, and then your work, yes, of course, it could be duplicated, but it doesn't matter, because as we've seen with the likes of like the diamond industry, for instance, it actually matters not that the fact that it's there, but where it comes from and what badge is on it. What labeling does it have with it? So I think that's the way that this is going to go, is the fact that, it's not as versus AI, because it is an inevitability. We've got to use those things in how do you take a person who is struggling, and Tyler, you know a little bit of this, and some other people in the room do. When you're becoming a content creator, it's where do you go, what do you do, how do you do these things? And sure, you can teach yourself, but that's a very high bar of entry to get to the level of caliber that makes you get noticed in whatever circles you care about. So if you instead you have these assistive AIs that can guide you and say, look, this market's really good for you, these people are really good for you, maybe push this kind of content to these areas, I think that's the way forward. That's the way that we don't end up hating our digital counterparts.
Yeah, if I could mention something, this is David. I think, like I mentioned earlier about the licensing show that's taking place in Vegas right now, there's a segment between the critical art and or critically popular art and commercially popular art. There's an artist, Christian Reese Larson, I believe his name is, he's consistently made over $50 million a year in his art, very commercially successful. He considers himself a fine artist as well, but many people just consider him sort of kitschy type, fairly average, generic art. Many of us have, I'm sure you've seen it. It's pictures of dolphins or undersea pictures, a lot of neon or primary colors. It's very Miami Vice looking, if you remember that TV show from the 80s. But he's an extremely commercially successful artist. And there's several others like that are very, very successful, but are not critically successful. So I think how we define creativity, how we define art, is a big part of that, and what does or does not translate into commercial success. Thanks.
And just quickly, Tyler, on the EA thing, I'll be really quick. I don't particularly see that going ahead personally, for multiple reasons. One is, if you look through like Apple's acquisition, although yes, they have an enormous amount of money. If you look at their acquisition, I think Beats was their largest, and it was like 3 or 4 billion. EA is currently sitting at just under 40 billion evaluation. So it would be a massive investment, to the likes that, as far as I'm aware, we haven't seen from Apple ever. Also, there's the anti-competition things. They've just come out of a series of really messy lawsuits with how they operate the App Store and how they approach games. I cannot imagine the level of anti-competition lawsuits that would be levied against them if they actually bought a gaming company as large as EA and started making their own games. There's already a history of Apple taking apps that they like the look of, with the likes of, say, Flux, for instance, and then removing them from the App Store for arbitrary reasons, and then making their own version and baking it in. So I don't really see that that's going to happen. Also, EA, although they're huge, their popularity is declining. Their game series are just people are getting used to the fact that it's cookie dumped out. Their IP, well, they've got the Frostbite engine. That's 13, 14 years old now. It's very old engine. They have got the Ignite engine, which is specifically catered towards sports generation, AI, body physics, and that kind of thing. So I think if they were to have any sort of dealings with EA, maybe we could see something in the fitness space with them maybe using some of EA or working with them in a collaboration to develop some sort of VR, which we know is coming for an absolute fact with Apple, some sort of VR software potentially, and getting EA to help around with that, maybe using the Ignite engine. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, EA has already worked with Meta for one of their Medal of Honor games. I think it was, they did a VR version, so they're obviously open to this concept, but I'm not sure. An acquisition is very unlikely in my mind. But anyway,
Yeah, but that's not fair. Microsoft gets to buy one. I want one too. If Microsoft gets to buy a game company, I want one too, said Apple.
It's not a very good game company to buy, bluntly.
But by the way, what someone just said about like Microsoft, doing what they're doing, and then Apple being able to say that sometimes happens with antitrust. If they let one go, they have to usually let the other one go. But Carl has a good point, and because quite frankly, from what I'm hearing, it's EA that's really shopping itself. Okay, they're looking for a partner, whether it's a sale or a partnership. They're looking for some affiliation, and that's why I mentioned the other day there were some conversations that had been reported with Comcast, but Comcast was not going to buy them. What Comcast supposedly was going to do was going to try to spin off NBC Universal from the rest of Comcast, put it in a new company, and then kind of merge that with EA. And I think they may have had some control issues because the CEO of EA wants to remain in control, but Brian Roberts at Comcast is always a control freak. That's why he's got super voting stock, and that may have been, the hang up on that. So, I think EA is definitely in play for something, okay? And it may not be Apple, but the Apple story's out there. So all I said was it was a story. It didn't say it wasn't an announcement. So anyway, I'm done speaking on that.
The other quick thing that possibly could happen, and this would be quite exciting, but I'm not sure about it, is if they want to go sort of an Epic style and release a series of Apple game building for gaming sort of framework, as it were. So putting together a system potentially with EA, that would then pull people even further into the Apple ecosystem when they're making these. I mean, obviously they're going to be looking at the anti-competition stuff with their App Store, and they're thinking forward into the VR space, and they're thinking how are we going to do that? Now, I don't know if they're going to merge the App Store and put VR games in there. I actually highly doubt it. I think they might do a separate one and maybe keep the legalities and legislation with the VR App Store separate from the current issues with the mobile App Store. And they could want a system in there. They could want a set of building blocks that make it easier to build certain games. And obviously, once you're in that ecosystem and you're using those things, if they come with a pre-built store system, an inventory system, and a saving system and that kind of thing, if they offer them and you use them, it's much harder for you then to complain about any particular cut they take. And it's much harder for you to say things like, oh, I'd like to sell access to my game outside of the store, because the actual purchasing and everything else will be using those building blocks. So maybe, I don't know, we'll see.
Okay, let's get to the next one. So as somebody mentioned, Elon Musk plans to provide an additional $6.25 billion in equity financing for his Twitter buyout, which I think would remove the doubts of people who are questioning his motives or his sincerity, boosting his commitment to $33.5 billion. Twitter's stock rises 5%. A daughter article from Axios says Jack Dorsey leaves Twitter's board of directors effective today. Dorsey has discussed rolling over his 2.4% Twitter stake into Elon Musk's takeover deal. And another daughter article, Twitter shareholders vote to remove Silver Lake co-CEO from the company's board. Durbin is his name is Egan Durbin. Durbin is a longtime business associate and backer of Elon Musk. Okay. Next big topic is from Reuters. Yes.
Sorry. That shifting around of the board members and everything else, what is that going to have had any effect on the whole Elon Musk thing? Like, could part of the fact that we've obviously there's the big thing about bots, a big thing about sort of Elon holding back and whatnot, but obviously there's internal things going on in Twitter. Is there stuff in there where they're trying to get their house in order, as it were? Finally getting rid of Dorsey technically, air quotes technically, and then this other individual.
I don't know is my honest answer. I would love to talk to somebody who has a lot of board governance backgrounds and board politics to kind of help us understand what these moves are about. So that's an opportunity to invite somebody you might know who might have some kind of insider view on the on those types of issues. So if somebody does, feel free to ping them in and let us know when they're in, and we'll try and get their insights on that. The next is from Reuters. Sony says it plans to ramp up PlayStation 5 production and signals a radical broadening of its game portfolio, including more titles on PC and mobile. Yeah, video games are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And as evidence of that point, Andreessen Horowitz just announced a massive new fund dedicated to games. If that doesn't tell you that games are going to get big, I don't know what does. The next is from Bloomberg. They say they have sources that Apple plans to keep iPhone production at around 220 million devices, about the same as last year, compared to 240 million as markets had forecasted amid inflation and a tough market. The next is that Binance and FTX and Crypto.com and Bitfinex, those are the big exchanges, and other exchanges have pledged support for Do Kwon's Terra 2.0, set to launch on Friday by airdropping tokens. And the Financial Times has done a interview with Epic's CEO Tim Sweeney on creating the metaverse. Well, there you go. If that doesn't prove my point I was trying to make earlier, I don't know what does. About growing the Unreal Engine, Apple and Google's App Store policies, Meta's metaverse plans, and more. So Financial Times correctly is interviewing one of the right people to ask about the metaverse, which is Epic's Tim Sweeney, because Epic has the Unreal Engine, which is one of those two mega platforms which people use to make video games today, and the metaverse tomorrow. Although the people at Roblox will jump in and say, "What about us?" And no doubt Minecraft might want to be part of that conversation, and so too would who is that? Snapchat, in a way, or no, Niantic, the makers of Pokemon Go, would also take issue with all of this. But I think Epic and Unreal and Unity are uniquely in a really nice spot as we go into the next big platform of computing, and Tim's right at the center of that. So probably worth a worthwhile interview. He tweeted by saying that Tim Bradshaw, who's at Tim on Twitter, said it's a great interview. And that instead of apps in the future, I think you'll see something more like a metaverse browser that points to the right standard, and you can visit any metaverse experience. And the language, we're at the stage of development where the language is getting vernacularized, where it's going to be called experiences. That we're almost settled on that metaverse experiences. Instead, it used to be web pages, and then it was apps, and now it's going to be experiences. So, anywho, the next is TechCrunch says they have sources that one-click checkout service Bolt has laid off more than 100 employees across go-to-market, sales, and recruiting roles amid slowing revenue and consumer growth. Yeah, the whole company's imploding. We read about that last month. They really screwed that up. That's a really sad story.
And that had a $6 billion valuation at the end of last year.
Yeah, it seems to point squarely at the founder, who just was a little too, I guess, immature might be the right word. I'm not sure what the right word is. I don't want to be disparaging in any case, but this was something that people really this is a real opportunity for a startup to, this is an absolute, $50 billion company opportunity that was essentially mismanaged, and it's a real sadness that it was, because they
Yeah,
were in.
but Tyler, a lot of the fintechs are blowing up because, as I said from the very beginning, it's not as it doesn't meet the hype. They're basically in traditional businesses, other than maybe their mobile app looks a little bit more sleeker than J.P. Morgan or Wells Fargo. But I mean, they're basically in the same businesses. They've got they're trying to make spread income. They've got borrowing costs. They've got regulations. I mean, it's all of those things. So I mean, so anyway, that's my take on it. I mean, as a generalization, even with what anyone calls fintech.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one is a profile of Stripe's John and Patrick Collison, who are the two brothers, the founders of Stripe. Sources say the startup's gross revenue rose 60% year over year, nearly $12 billion in 2021, as net revenue reached almost $2.5 billion. And Stripe is a juggernaut. There's no two ways about that. And continues to just add awesome. I spent most of today in Stripe, believe it or not, the project I'm working on, just as a point of proof of that. It's fantastic. They're just kicking ass and continue to kick more ass. And the key is the simplicity and saving people time. Anyway, the
And that's
next
the one fintech that's actually really working well, but most of them aren't.
right, and sadly, it's the one that's still private. Unless you buy
Well,
Shopify.
Tyler,
Yeah.
what's your
Yes.
what's your view on Klarna and Stripe? Because Klarna is downsizing right now,
Yes.
while Stripe, I guess
Before,
I haven't checked, but
is it just reportedly downsizing, or have there been
no, it's going to happen. No, it's
Yeah.
confirmed.
Yeah.
10%.
Yeah. So I think Klarna suffered is a bit of its from a bit of its own success, in that it got replicated in every. I mean, they started out in sleepy little Scandinavia, and where it was a very well kept secret for a while, right? You and I know that because we dabble with,
Hmm.
where we spend a lot of time. And then they went over to the UK and then the US. And I think, in hindsight, I would imagine, and next time I talk to Sebastian, I'll ask him that in hindsight they probably should have gone in much stronger into the U.S. and into the U.K. And by the way, I got a humdinger of a story that I've only told I think once before. That basically Klarna, which really popularized pioneered this whole buy now pay later concept, has now been copied. You think Clubhouse was copied? Clubhouse was copied like 5 times, right? By Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, who else, right? A lot of people, Spotify. Klarna has been copied dozens and dozens of times all over the planet. Like every market got its own buy now pay later, because you need to go in and make partnerships, which is kind of a manual process with the major e-retailers and retailers in a geography, and they had done that brilliantly in Scandinavia. And the problem was going to the US and trying to do that is a very daunting task, especially for somebody who's not from America. Or, going into a foreign market like India or China or anywhere. It's just very, very tricky to do. And everyone did that. And everyone went and conquered their local, it got cloned everywhere. And all of those clones took off almost simultaneously, and they all became unicorns wherever they happened to grow. And that limited Klarna's ability to continue to grow at the rate that it had for quite a long while. Because now they're competing square on with local competitors, which is quite tricky to do because Americans have never heard of Klarna. But, they have heard of PayPal, and when you have one of PayPal's co-founders building a firm, he's has a bit of an advantage, a home field advantage, let's say, in partnering with Amazon as they did. And anyways, it makes it very tricky to continue to grow at that incredible rate that they had. And that is the predicament of startups, is it's growth at all costs, and you must maintain this incredible at times ridiculous growth rate. And if you don't, then it's that the ship doesn't stay afloat unless you're going full speed ahead. And so now they've come up against, and by the way, so have a lot of big companies. So Netflix did too. A lot of companies reached kind of maturity within their particular market. Netflix had a similar problem. A whole bunch of competitors came up simultaneously, and it makes it very tricky. The market kind of starts out full. Imagine a tree full of fruit, and you pick off the low-hanging fruit. Next thing you know, you got to get the ladders, and then you got to get poles on top of the ladders, and you're picking not low-hanging fruit, and you start competing for the fruit at the top of the tree. And that's when things get the boat slows down, and it gets a little, in startup land, that's dangerous territory, because now you got to go IPO rather quickly is the normal strategy in that case.
Yeah, but Tyler, that wasn't their only problem. I mean,
I know.
firm blew up also, so you have a problem in the space. Actually,
I spent a lot of time highlighting that particular problem. That's kind of the essence of my point. And the story that I wanted to tell was that in the case of a firm who you could argue is their biggest competitor, because it's their main competitor in the U.S., who I imagine is outperforming them in the U.S., was started by Max Levchin, who is a co-founder of PayPal. And Max is part of the PayPal mafia. He's hyper well connected in fintech. He's one of the OGs of fintech in the US. And the story that I heard, and this comes from essentially the source, that Klarna's main investor is Sequoia. And if you are a Sequoia portfolio company, then the portfolio CEO, Sequoia portfolio CEOs get invited to the Sequoia Summit, of which I actually attended one year. And the CEOs get together, and it's a very private, exclusive, secretive, no notes, no tweeting, no social media, anything, right? And Sebastian is the CEO of Klarna. He went there and he did a little interview, and he revealed how they're kicking so much ass in Scandinavia, kind of mind-blowing ass kicking that they're doing. And they've just dominated. They've got this amazing new mousetrap, this whole new amazing thing called Buy Now, Pay Later. It's a far better thing. It's going to take over credit cards. It's just incredible. It's a win-win-win, unless you're a Visa or MasterCard. But for merchants, for buyers, for everybody, it's just incredible. So Max Levchin was also at that CEO summit from my source, who was listening and obviously paying very close attention as one of the OG fintech founders. And decided ostensibly to clone Klarna in the US because he knows a good opportunity when he sees one. And before Klarna really had an opportunity to go do the US market on their own, because they were, I think at that time, the UK was their first kind of foreign market that they were focusing on at the time. And so that's kind of unkosher, by the way, in Silicon Valley culture, to sort of just clone somebody in that sort of a way. But Max essentially cloned Klarna, from what I understand. And if so, that's quite deplorable. And it's gone full steam ahead with it. And what my source tells me that led to a very heated phone conversation that Sequoia had to mediate between Klarna and Max Levchin to explain why Max stole their business model because they're planning to come to the U.S. And the fact that he did it at Sequoia's rather secretive, leave your phones at the door kind of meeting, is just an interesting backstory that has never really seen the light of day. Anyway, so the next topic is interviews with former and current Microsoft employees suggest a widespread pattern of executive misconduct persists years after Satya Nadella vowed to end it. And Matt, what do you have to say about that, Matt? You've got Business Insider at it again. They just can't stop. My goodness.
I picked the exact same time that I was putting something in my mouth. Sorry. Having breakfast. When you're typically having dinner, I'm having breakfast. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So I don't know what it is. This is just late stage journalism. They've become tabloids at this point. I sense that this is based on nothing, and it's just clickbait. This is I would file this under the same kind of part of my brain when I used to go to the supermarket and the National Enquirer was talking about, aliens, giving birth to lizard-headed babies and stuff. It's just really unfortunate that this qualifies as journalism anymore. And it's from the same source who just continues to do this kind of despicable sort of excuse for journalism. Business Insider just can't help themselves but do these kinds of stories. So it says, the Business Insider story says, Microsoft promised to get rid of talented jerks. Employees say they're still running wild. Matt, are you one of these such talented jerks?
Tyler, when you vetted my application, I think that speaks volumes. You allowed me to get here. Sorry, this is the worst protein bar. It tastes it's awful, and it takes me like 3 glasses of water to get it down. No. To your question,
that's called deflecting, Matt. Go ahead.
It's a big organization, but I know they're making some changes. I actually didn't see this article because, for the same reason, pardon me, you click on anything, it's $2. So I apologize, you got me at the worst moment, but no, I did not see the article. But retention and recruiting and retention of the right type of profile is diverse profile is welcomed here. So I've enjoyed it here, but I never speak on behalf of Microsoft, pushing products or platforms. It's really just an industry lens, but not aware of the article. I'll check it out.
Yeah, they're trying to paint Microsoft as a toxic culture, yada yada. It just doesn't hold up to even the simple scrutiny of the fact that how many employees are there at Microsoft?
I believe 70,000.
Right. So you're asking me to believe that a company of 70,000 people that's been around since the 80s, and you're just now they've managed to keep this a secret for what 30 years?
Yeah, no, I'll say this on behalf of my career. We all have different disciplines, and I would say that my experience at Microsoft, I wouldn't say this. I wouldn't. First of all, I wouldn't say anything negative about my company, but I also wouldn't work for a company where I had to speak negatively because then I'm pointing the finger back at me. I've been at a lot of tech companies. I've been in Israel, Spain, a long stint at Cisco, 5 years at Adobe, and before I came to Microsoft, I looked at all of the tech companies that we've talked about, and I will say, while I am in only one person, and they say 68% of your happiness, maybe even higher than that, is a reflection on your manager. I have had zero issues, since I've been here. Are there some things that, I want to do that I can't do? Sure. I mean, that's any job. But I would say my experience, and you have to sort of factor in their response to the pandemic, which I'm sure is a constant in many other tech companies. But my experience here, and I was hesitant when I came here because I started thinking, about past leaders, maybe questionable things. But my experience here has been great. And I'll say a lot of my experience in helping understand and lead industry with their customers, I get a tremendous value out of hearing from you. Because the one thing I would say that for technology in the U.S., Microsoft has a
You're pandering to the jury. Objection.
Say again.
You're pandering to the jury. I call an objection.
No,
Hold on.
no. But I
Hearsay.
Let me read this here. I'm reading the tweet thread that they just put out today, and the essence of their thread. And watch. Tell me this doesn't sound familiar with the takedown story that they tried to do on Apple about 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. It says, in 2021, a group of employees contributed to a report detailing complaints according to 2 people familiar with the matter. So their proposition here is they've got some current and former Microsoft people, like, I don't know, 5 of them, who are willing to speak unfavorably, maybe on or off the record, about how things are at Microsoft. Now, this is a company, mind you, of 70,000 people. That's bigger than most significant cities, right?
Isn't that number more like 180,000? Because that's what I saw on the web. Maybe that's global. Since this, because 70,000 seemed too low for Microsoft, so I looked it up, and it looks like I saw something that says 180,000.
I have
regardless, it's over 70,000. It's big. That's what.
Hold on, the internet, the Google says Microsoft total number of employees in 2020 was 163,000. So now we're really talking the size of an actual proper city, right? Now, Can you find 5 people out of 160? I can get 5 people out of 163,000 to say that their mother is the Antichrist.
Probably 2 in this room.
I could exactly right. So let's do that. That's a great example, Matt. Out of this room, I could find 5 people who will say that Tech News Around the World is the worst room in Clubhouse in this room. So what does that mean? And there's only currently at this moment 300 people in the room. We're talking about 170 fucking thousand people. Imagine a Clubhouse room with 170,000 people, and let's find 5 of them over 30 years, 30 fucking years, who are willing to say something negative and then write a story about that. That is called utter nonsense, is what that is. This is how the misinformation sausage is made. Is because Americans and people generally in 2023 are so bad at critical thinking that they believe that if any 5 people agree on something about anything, that must be relevant to anything. So that, some former Microsoft employees are got together and they're saying something bad. Well, it's more than 3 people, so let me just do some basic math. Well, that's a lot of people, so that must be true. It's like the Donald Trump thing. People are saying, some people said.
Well, I mean,
So
back it out to the most recent announcements. I mean, we talked a couple months ago in terms of, I think it was you, Tyler, that mentioned the post about people leaving the HoloLens
Tyler, I
group, and
think
this is
you're
a
breaking
mark.
up. Or is it only for me?
Can you
well,
hear me all right, Tyler?
yeah,
Yeah,
you
yes,
sound
yes,
great.
Phil.
There was an article. Somebody please remind me what it was. I believe it was Apple, and I went on the exact same rant where
Right.
and I believe it was Business Insider, who said we've got 3 or 5 Apple Store employees. It was actually 9. I remember this because I actually went to an Apple Store as a result of this article, because the article said they had somewhere in the neighborhood of 7, 8, 9, or 10 former Apple retail employees who say that they're just being wildly mistreated, blah, 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 blah. So I was like, hold on. This journalist, and I can assure you it was an editor who cooked up this cockamamie idea to get clicks. Okay. All right, everybody. What did you have for lunch? Oh, you had the cream filled donuts. Okay, great. Listen, everybody, put down your donuts. Here's the idea. I got a story idea. Let's go find me 8 disgruntled Apple employees. I don't care how long it takes. 2 weeks. Go find them. Get them on the record. We got 8 disgruntled Apple employees. That's all it takes, and then we can write the story about these 8, former Apple employees say it's a tragedy, and they, it's like a concentration camp. Blah 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 blah. Okay, now they're doing the exact same tactic of tabloid journalism based on misrepresentation of data, and that's the crime right there, because they're using a statistically meaningless number of witnesses. So if to actually accuse Apple of being egregiously abusive of employees, you're going to need somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 5% of employees to agree to that. Well, what is 5% of 100,000? You're going to need somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 people to agree to that. You don't have 5,000. You have 5. So I went to an Apple store, talked to the first 5 people who I met at the store, because there's always 100 people in those fucking stores, and I said, hey, do you like working here? Is it generally I found 8 people who said it was the best job they ever had. The first 8 people I asked. What does that tell you about that article? It tells you that article's bullshit, is what that tells you.
Hey, Tyler, I can give you some little bit of insight here. I actually used to have a blog like 10 years ago, and Business Insider was just getting started, and they approached me because I knew the founder. And he said, could we just syndicate your blog? And I mean, I did some stupid things, like I didn't ask for any money or any equity. I just was trying to get more people to read my thing, so I figured why not, and let them syndicate it. But they were just supposed to syndicate it as written. And there was one story that one of their editors took my story, made up his own headline that was very misleading. I went like nuts over it, and they had to print a retraction. And that was kind of like, that was kind of my end of relationship with Business Insider. So yeah, I've seen that before. I mean, that's even like 10 years ago. I mean, trying to come up with a more of a clickbait headline that's, which is one thing, but it's actually misleading as to what I actually wrote. So yeah.
170,000 employees. Who gives a shit you found 5 employees that are disgruntled? What company of 170,000 doesn't have 5 disgruntled employees, or whatever? You're confusing. Tyler, this is a large-scale data set. This is a statistically significant group of people. I don't This think is, you're getting it. but this is the problem.
Well, but in journalism, it's 3 sources, so it's good. Although Tyler, we're giving something that we're saying shouldn't have airspace, a lot of airspace. I mean, I agree with you. I think the most relevant content is that people need to learn to think, and or not. People we're missing some critical thinking in our population.
Okay, now check it out. Now watch what they did in this tweet thread. Check this out. I'm going to pin this to the top of the room. Look how they fan the flames on this dumpster fire. Watch this. What this is. Look how far they go. This is just so egregious. Watch this. I'm going to pin it to the top of the room. Here's the tweet thread. The tweet that I just pinned says, dozens of Microsoft Dozens of women at Microsoft used an internal email group to share stories of gender discrimination at work, calling on management to address pay and promotion gaps between men and women. Okay, yeah, out of 170,000, I would expect hundreds, but okay, dozens, okay. And the choice quote, you know how when you read an article, they know you're not going to read the whole article, so they know you're a lazy, you know what, so they cut out a key sentence, usually a quote, and blow it up to 80 size font for your lazy brain, so that you can get the gist of the article by reading one little quote, right? So here's the 80-point font quote. It's quote, right now women are all paid equally until the women who aren't prove it. And then it's attributed to, obviously not a named source, a Microsoft employee in an internal email group. Well, there it is right there. A Microsoft employee said something about women. Blow that sucker up, Charlie. Listen, put down the donuts. We got them. We got them by the short and curlies now, because a Microsoft employee who doesn't dare name themselves, it doesn't matter to us, a Microsoft employee in an internal group said, quote, right now women are all paid equally until the women who aren't proven. We got them. We got them. And this is what's passing for journalism. This is literal digital dumpster diving is what they're doing.
It's brutal.
And here's a second blow up quote. Quote, I do a ton of interviews only to check a minority box. I waste a bunch of my time and everybody else's time. Oh, interesting, because it mentioned the word minority. That's why you chose that one, just like the previous one was about women, and so that's why you chose that one. And it's because you, as the shit-stirring scumbags that you are, know that one way to get people furious is to mention injustices against women and minorities. And so you're intentionally searching in these documents for anything that mentions women or minorities, and you found them, and that's why you highlight those as the breakout points, which again aren't attributed to anybody. Why not? Why not name the person's name? Anyway, digital dumpster diving in Microsoft's garbage bin, recycle bin, probably. Anywho, Business Insider, you just continue to go from. Gee, what happened? Henry, what happened? What happened? You got so thirsty. You've become the National Enquirer of tech journalism. Just call it TMZ Tech. TMZ Tech. That's got a ring to it. Yeah. Okay. Next big topic is.
So Tyler,
yes.
let me just punctuate just 2 sentences. So I had no knowledge of the story. So when I was answering in context, it looked like I was pandering. You're not the jury. You don't.
I'm making a joke. Yeah.
No. I was just going to say though, like literally on a completely different vector. We're planning for next year, and a lot of the things that we get is comes from this call. So that's why I'm here. Otherwise, life's short, time is short.
Anyway,
but yeah, good stuff.
Let me put it this way. Normally, if this was real journalism, you would have a whole bunch. You know how one of the signs that you could take this as one of the indicators that this is worth even thinking about or even reading is you would have notable people sharing and discussing it on Twitter. And you don't in this case. Nobody's talking about this article. Nobody's tweeting this article. Nobody's sharing this article because everyone knows it's a Business Insider constructed hit piece based on a few disgruntled people who went to work got up on the wrong side of the bed that day generally. So, you shouldn't take it seriously either. Is the point. The next one is Bloomberg, the tech market collapse. Oh, gee, I wonder if they got a horse in this race. Aided by macroeconomic forces is an opportunity to reckon with inflated valuations, overzealous VCs, and the rise of crypto startups. Over the past half century, Silicon Valley has toggled between two similar sounding pursuits that are often in conflict, wealth creation and money making. And you have to admire and appreciate the mainstream media who've been having a bit of a collapse themselves since, in the past decade or so, and they're just reveling in the fact that the tech companies who have just been disemboweling them over the past decade or so are having a few very rough weeks, and they're rolling in it like pigs in shit. These mainstream media types, I just couldn't be happier that these big tech behemoths who stole all of their business models and ran away with all their money, are having a rough few weeks. So they're making hay while the sun shines. I can't blame them. Plus, they're also jumping on they love the Bitcoin price reduction. They Good. love that. I mean, Yeah. it's a wash with, if you invest in Bitcoin, be prepared to lose it all. And it's so preachy, didactic from these broadsheet established media players. They're just boring. The next is from the Seattle Times. At its annual meeting, Amazon shareholders approve Andy Jassy's $212 million pay package and vote down 15 proposals on unionization and the environment and more. And there you go. That's the kind of thing you might expect from the Seattle Times. They're taking issue with the CEO of one of the world's biggest companies making far less than his contemporaries, and that they voted down unionization and that they voted down issues on the environment. But that's actually some journalism there. And they're not overly sensationalizing it. They're driving awareness to their audience. I'm actually don't take too much of an issue with this, that they're bringing some transparency to a meeting, that most people probably overlooked. And no, that's still following the in the footsteps of what journalism is meant to be about. So I have no issue with it. The next is from the Wall Street Journal. Some hotels are looking to guarantee booking revenue by partnering with startups like Pink Tata that convert stays into NFTs to be bought and sold by guests. This is wild. NFTs are also being used to raise capital.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. NFTs are being used to raise capital to buy golf courses or land, giving token buyers a stake in the projects. So this is NFTs for real estate. And again, the article from the Wall Street Journal, some hotels are looking to guarantee bookings revenue by partnering with startups to convert stays into NFTs that can be bought and sold by the guests. I should do that for my beach resort, because people would. You know what that does, though? This I'll give you, as somebody who's kind of a minor expert on this particular topic, as a resort owner myself. Here's something to think about. The idea, in essence, is that you're creating a token around your stays. So let's say you own a beach resort in Thailand. That's a real stretch for me. And different days of the year are worth different amounts, right? And one of your jobs, you could argue, is to maximize the amount of money people are willing to pay for different times of the year. In Thailand, the Christmas New Year's week is by far the most coveted time of the year. And so, not surprisingly, hotels and resorts charge a lot more for that time of the year. Well, not all of them do. Some are too lazy to even bother doing that. And some are too lazy to even put their booking engine online. But anyway, so Airbnb and Booking.com and Expedia and all the rest allow you to go in and create different, prices for different times of the year. And you can charge more on weekends, and you can charge more during Christmas, and you can charge more during the summer holiday break. And if you've been in business in that geography for a little while, you start to understand the seasonality. And when there's this annual conference that comes to town, like the World Economic Forum in Davos, and of course they're charging 10 times more this week than they do the rest of the year. Common sense, right? Right. Well, this article points to the fact that if the hotel makes NFTs of the stays, then the value of that booking. So let's say we make NFTs for one for each day of the year, and we sell them, and I collect all the money now. And then the owner of the NFT for December 31st, which is the hottest day of the year, that goes on the market. And everybody who wants to stay in that beach house on December 31st can trade that NFT. And so that would go up to a price of, X, right? And so ideally, wouldn't it be amazing if you, as the resort owner, had the ability to fluidly update your price based on real demand, right? And the idea of this article is that NFTs are going to unlock this new opportunity to do this, right? But that the guests might benefit in this whole process. Anyway, the
Hey,
reality.
Tyler,
Hold on, I got to give I just gave the setup. Now I got to give the punchline. The punchline is hotels can do exactly this. There are tools like Rate Genie, which know the price that people are willing to pay seasonally and at the other resorts around you, and the amount of volume of search activity that's going on for your properties and properties like you, and the amount of bookings that are happening for that time of the year for the past 50 years. And all of that data is known, and there are AI engines built on those to help you magically, without any work on your part, magically charge the optimum amount that people are willing to pay on a day by day, week by week, season and dynamically, because years change in the amount of demand and supply year by year, and they will magically optimize based on the amount of people that are, doing all of this. These things exist today, but this, I guarantee you, this article and the journalists who wrote it aren't familiar with these services, and so they're going to pretend that like NFTs are unlocking some hot new thing, which the unique aspect of the NFT is that it empowers the guest more than the hotel. But from the hotel's perspective, this doesn't really help much, other than it puts the money in your pocket now instead of months from now. Sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
Wait, can I just, yeah, I really quickly agree with all of that. And the additional perspective is that it's a little bit like a timeshare, which is how I would look at that, which is where they're saying, hey, it's a marketing tool, super sexy look. You do your conference or do your trip, we're going to NFT it, which makes it easy for the guest to commit now because they think they'll be able to sell it later, either, as you said, at a higher price if the guest is reselling it, or if they can't sell it, the guest is still on the hook. So the hotel, as you said, they know exactly what they're going to get. They have Rate Genie and everything else. They know what they can get for it, but it's a buy-in now. And that comes to mind because I'm locked into a timeshare, and every time I can't use it, it's my responsibility to either lose that money or sell it. And that's, so this seems a little bit more akin to that. And then giving you, though, that right to resell it is a marketing ploy to get you to buy it now. That you think it's less risk.
can I just weigh in here, Donna?
Yeah,
There's an
side. Oh,
article.
Donna, go ahead.
Sorry, hi. Yeah, Matt Levine, who's also at Bloomberg, wrote about this in depth, not yesterday, the day before. And he gave the example of what Casa de Campo is doing. The guest actually buys it at a discount.
right.
They don't pay what the going rate is going to be, and then if they get the hotel, as Tyler and all you said, get the stream of income now. That's determined. The guest, if they want to cancel or change, they have to sell their NFT. They can't go back to the hotel and change their reservation. So it's a non-cancelable at a discount, and the guest can then sell it to somebody else. So Matt Levine, who's very, very skeptical of everything to do with crypto, everything to do with NFTs, actually thought that this was a good business plan. So we can see what happens in the future.
Okay, I
So
want
I
to
think
comment.
what
Hold
will
on, hold
happen.
on, hold on, hold on. Let me comment. That is interesting unless you consider the fact that, and by the way, I do, as anyone who's ever stayed with me knows, I don't allow cancellations. I have a zero refund policy. So, as the first sentence in this article says, some resort owners think they have found a way to avoid getting stuck with excess inventory when guests cancel at the last minute. Well, I don't, because I don't have that problem. because guests don't cancel at the last minute because I
Yeah, but
don't allow
Tyler,
them.
you're the
But to
exception. If you
Tyler,
look at what
Donna's
Tyler, if
point,
you look
though,
what's
I'm
going
Mike.
not.
on in the hotel business right now, they have very liberal cancellation policies right now. So you're the exception at this point.
Well, for whatever reason, if I
But
was
we
a
are trying
if
to
I was a
facilitate.
hotel resort owner and I just happened to be, I wouldn't. I don't. I can't imagine why a hotel would allow anyone to cancel in this particular environment that we're in, geopolitically and
All the
medically.
big ones, Tyler, all the big hotels like yours is probably a destination they don't want to cancel. They're actually vying to get it. But as Donna described it, it's a marketing tool because now the user takes that on that they're more likely to, then there's tons of, vacant hotels. I'm in, the Bay Area. So if they can somehow put this marketing glitch on it,
Yep.
which gives you, a little bit less, the
I'll give
vacant.
you. Yeah, but listen, I will give you the best case scenario for. I'll give you the best argument for why a resort would love this. Here it is. It's because many resorts have lots of staff, like dozens of team members, and they would like to keep them employed. But to keep them employed, they need to make sure that they have all of these future bookings. Whether or not they show up doesn't really matter. It's that they were all of the future bookings are paid for. Those are paid for. I can take that money. I can pay my team. My team stays here. I don't have to shut down the resort, which hundreds of resorts had to do in the islands of Thailand because they couldn't foresee if people were going to come or not. So we can't risk keeping all of our staff employed. So we have to scale down the staff to some bare minimum amount. We can't keep the pool open because we don't have the lifeguard. We have to shut down the bar because we don't have the bartender. Blah 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 blah. In this case, you solve all of that. You throw it all out there at a discounted rate. You get all the book. Not, it's basically like giving a sale. You don't technically need NFTs for this. You could have a sale on all of your future upcoming. Buy them all at half price now, but they're non-refundable. And essentially, you'd have the same thing. And I'm collecting the money now rather than when you arrive. Which, by the way, I do that too. I don't take a book. I don't accept a booking until your money is in my bank account. And then you have a booking, which you can never cancel. I essentially do exactly this, what this new technology of NFTs is providing these resorts. Tyler, that
Tyler,
sentence, you
I
don't
can tell
need
you, having
the
worked with a lot of
sentence.
large hotels, when you're
Speak
when
about
you're
your
dealing with
point
large hotels in
now.
big cities,
One
it's a completely
one at a
different business.
time. Cannot hear.
So what I think what will happen is the same what happens with concert tickets here in the US is that you can have basically a broker market with hotel reservations now. So you take up the risk as a broker that maybe some reservations will be unsold in the future, but you can basically buy cheap now, sell it more expensive later, and make you create an in between market point where you can make money. I don't think this will be helpful for a single hotel or for a single customer. I think this will just create an in between way
Yeah,
to make
but
money on
Katerina,
hotels.
such
Katerina,
reseller
that's
market
spot.
already exists, right? You do not really need a blockchain to do that.
So,
Yeah,
Tyler,
Yeah,
you're
I
sent. You're,
Katerina,
Airbnb
that's exactly
has
what
for a long
Matt
time.
Levine analogizes it to StubHubs. So you're correct on that in his article. The other thing that he does talk about, and I know Tyler doesn't apply to your hotel, but is if I buy something and I can't go, but I want to give it to Katerina who can go,
I
that
allow that.
I understand that, but it's still what they're saying here is that then creates some administrative stuff for your hotel. And since people are short of employees, me swapping Katerina means that your front desk or whoever front desk has to now do that switcheroo. And it might take a few emails to do. Anyway, I just
It does,
pointed out.
but to be clear, I do allow transfers because when people try to cancel, I say you can't cancel. But if you have somebody else who wants to come in your place, you already paid for those days. You can pass them on to somebody else, and if you want to charge them more, knock yourself out. And by the way, I go even one step further. I tell them, hey, guess what? I'm going to remove your blocking of those dates in that room on my calendar to enable somebody else to book those dates that you previously had blocked. And if somebody else books your dates, I will then refund you a significant portion of that money because you're asking for a refund. I don't give refunds, but what I can do is the room's already paid for. You're not coming. You remove your right to those rooms on those dates, let somebody else have them, somebody else pays for them. I don't need to be paid twice for them. You've already paid for them. If somebody else is willing to pay for them, then I can refund you essentially all of whatever it was. That then essentially you do get a refund, but I still get my payment for those days for that room.
Yeah, but Tyler, it's like what Don is saying, and I think we're all saying the exact same thing, except we're describing it differently. But you're moving the if there are hotels
Right.
that can't always
I
fill
could
their
do that.
rooms,
I
they're
could say, listen,
filling them and moving the onus to the no, but they're moving the
that's fine.
onus to the purchaser both
Yeah,
as a
you're
marketing
right.
So,
ploy
so
If it
and
Tyler,
if it actually was a real onus, I would do exactly the same. I'd say, you know what, it would be a real big headache for me to change the name of the booking. By the way, I can't think of an easier thing to do in all of the hotel industry than to change the name on the fucking booking. But anyway, if that was a real onus, then I would put it on them, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's just
But
too
if
big
you
of a
can't
headache."
resell that
You,
week, but Tyler,
you,
if you don't resell that week, that buyer's on the hook, and it makes it easier for them to allegedly, again, it's a marketing ploy to
right,
transfer it on a scrub or anything else. It's a scalping tickets, and ticket scalping is
right,
moving. Also, models coming out for NFTs. But I'm just back to my example. If I can't go skiing during the week I bought, it is on me to go sell that week. And if that shit
right,
snow week, it's not selling, but I'm
right,
still booked. So
right.
if it were an NFT, maybe it would be easier. Who knows?
So, Tyler, there was a sentence in what you said. There was a really the crucial sentence. You don't need NFTs for that. And Yes. I posit that any application of any NFT, if you analyze it, you'll get to the same conclusion. You don't need NFTs for that. You might want them. You might be able to sell them. It might be marketing hype. You don't need them. And the reason you Yeah. don't need them is because they don't solve any new problem. And the reason for that is the thing that I keep asking people to go and look up, which is the Oracle problem. So they just don't provide any new actual functionality in any circumstance, I would suggest. I'm happy to be Other proved than the wrong in the hype. back channel.
No, but yeah, and Ben,
No,
I agree.
the
I
hype,
guess,
absolutely the hype. Any day, the hype. And that's why I'm not really very down on them, because But I hate the idea of look, some artist that would love to get some eyes on their work and who is very talented missing out on the hype. So that's why I try not to be too negative on them so because
no,
the
but it's
NFTs are
not just
about
the
hope.
art, though, Ben. I want to jump in. It's not just the art that you're selling. The NFTs that have more value are the ones that create utility, community, whatever they're backed by, right? So look at this. That is a marketing hype. It's not solving a problem that couldn't be solved otherwise. But both Gary Vee with his, V friends, whatever they give you, which we talked about yesterday, the day before, they give you access to all of his, um, seminars, whatever you call it, and all this other stuff. Another marketing aspect there is that they are transferable. So if they go up in value, people decide more people want to go to Gary Vee stuff. He doesn't issue more NFTs. It's a limited edition, right? So you can sell it if they go up in value. If it's a 4-year NFT, you can sell it in 2 years.
But you
And
just don't need an
it's same
NFT
with
for
Sarah.
that.
Wait. Let me finish. Sarah Jessica Parker did the same thing with her winery, which is it's a wine membership, and again, does nothing, but you can sell that wine membership downstream. So instead of me canceling my wine membership, all of a sudden this NFT, whether it has value or not, looks like it has value. I can sell it to somebody if there's a buyer.
Yeah, that's the promise. But firstly, it doesn't need an NFT. It just needs some other centralized database, as Tyler has just explained in
No,
one
but an
example.
NFT is one mechanism and a marketing hype for doing it. And honestly,
Yeah,
people in
it's
this
the
room are
marketing
well
hype. Yeah,
ahead on the
Yeah, the
NFTs.
marketing. So
and it sounds very much like a security to me. That's the other issue. Okay, let me just say one thing, okay? Jack Dorsey's first tweet was sold at what? US 2.9 million. You know how much it is worth now?
zero.
78. No, he can still buy some Starbucks with it, $78.
The marketing.
2.9 million. The same guy is trying to sell at
By the way,
$78.
there's actually another kind of half utility or benefit to the NFT, which is depending on, for example, in Thailand, as a resort owner, you have to register with whatever payment systems you're receiving payments from, be it Stripe is in beta form, and I'm like the first hotel in all of Thailand to accept Stripe on my website or whatever, and PayPal is in a weird stage of functionality legally in Thailand at the moment for businesses, and you have to. Thailand's now gotten savvy to digital payments, and you have to comply with the digital payments and blah blah blah. The other kind of tangential benefit to this scheme is tax avoidance, essentially, because the Thai government is not at all familiar with this NFT that you use to sell these nights, and you're certainly not gonna. They're not gonna find the audit trail on that from whatever platforms offering these NFTs, and depending on how much visibility that NFT gets in whatever exchange it's being exchanged on, that marketing value is real value, but you don't necessarily benefit from it because you sold it at a fixed price, less than your normal market price, and it's the customer who's benefiting. But that does drive visibility to more people potentially buying more NFTs. So what the one tangible, real long term benefit ostensibly is, you would get what's called higher utilization or nights booked. The percentage of your room bookings, in theory, should go to 100 if done properly, and then that does have some meaningful value, especially in terms of keeping your operations running smoothly in terms of your staff numbers, which would be the main headache that resorts are dealing with in these kind of tumultuous times.
Could I one just quick comment, if that's okay?
For money laundering.
I see. Oh,
If you
Katerina, sorry, go
pass
ahead.
along often enough, you can anonymize whoever was in the hotel at that time point, because if you just need the token to show instead of your ID, if that goes that way, you can, if you pass it along often enough, it will really hard to track who was at the hotel at that time point. And then additionally, you can just, wash your money by trading it a bunch of times.
But Katerina, in most countries, as a foreigner, you need to provide your passport.
Passport.
Yes, they won't
When
So
you
let
check
that.
in, you need your
I'll give you
ID.
Yeah.
an example, a concrete example. Every place that accepts any visitors of any kind, even foreign or domestic, in Thailand, must register them in the immigration website or now app. At the Immigration Agency of Thailand has both an Android and iPhone app and a website, and anyone staying on your premises must be registered upon arrival, or you get very severely punished
Exactly.
theoretically. So it's
That's not. That's definitely not one of using NFTs.
by the way, when a foreigner goes to renew their 30-day visa, which is an incredibly common thing to do in Thailand. People end up staying longer than 30 days. They have to go to the immigration office and ask for a visa extension. The immigration office, the first thing they're going to require of them is the proof of their residence, which is the business or residence where they are staying must show proof that they are registered in that residence.
Exactly.
But
There's an
that's not the case
analogous.
in
What's that?
every country. I mean, if
What's
you
that? Is
travel
that just kind of a?
in Europe and I don't know, in small hotels, usually they ask for an ID from one person, but it doesn't get registered in some place and blah blah blah.
As a
Europe.
traveler or many countries, they always ask. I don't know. In the past few years, everybody need to provide a passport, and in Taiwan, everyone need to register because the local police station they will register
Well, I'll
the
tell you this:
stay. Yeah.
when you arrive at your port of entry in Thailand, on your every person who arrives and does the interview at the immigration desk has to fill out a little card called a TM6, and on the TM6 you must state where you are staying. So even you have to say where you're staying, and when the immigration officer questions you, guaranteed the only question they're going to have for you is questions about the place that you say you're staying at, and they're going to want to see if if they do ask you a question, they're going to ask for evidence of your uh, place of stay, where to confirm it, because they enter that into their database as soon as you enter. They want to know exactly where you're staying.
Especially Thailand is very strict on this one. You need to provide like the payment to, just like
Correct.
Tyler said, to prove that you have paid that hotel in advance.
There's an analogous situation where StockX is trying to use an NFT to trade sneakers. But essentially, that scenario is very similar to, using that as using an NFT as a claim analogy, which is that you don't have to send your sneakers back and forth. You can create unique NFT representing that sneaker, and then you can just buy and sell the NFT, and then the sneaker will be, stored in a safety, in a vault or something like that. So I
Yeah.
think this is analogous to, again, this claim check scenario. But I think the bigger question is that, I thought NFT is supposed to have a separate, independent value, other than the physical item, if you will. But this kind of approach, whether this is StubHub for hotels or sneakers or NFT, it's almost just reducing the usage of a blockchain to literally as a claim check to see, it's almost like somebody has an escrow of a physical item, and that the value of the NFT is still dependent upon the actual physical item. When I say physical item, I mean, that week in, Tyler's hotel or something, that is still something that has to be there, without which the NFT wouldn't really have a lot of value. So
Here,
this,
That,
here's I'm
that's
trying
the
to
crux.
right,
That's the
but
sorry, Tyler. Can I make one quick comment because I know I've got to run. Just real.
sure,
Is that okay? So
sure.
so just well, it's actually three comments, but they're all completely related. One is when analysing the value of this, it's worth looking at the difference between value and leverage. I see marketing as leverage on existing value. I can have a product of high value and marketing it is leveraging that value. If you look at it that way, then you see they have no value. And the reason that NFTs drop 100,000 times in value like this, or more, like this Jack Dorsey tweet, it's a bit like trying to listen to a whole bunch of people talking about perpetual motion machines when you understand thermodynamics. They come up with the idea that the car should be able to get more energy back coming down the hill than it went up, or this thing that ticks forever, or this whatever, solar powered car that can do 70 miles an hour continuously. All these things that are fundamentally impossible. And then you break each of them down and you see, it doesn't work. But as soon as you understand thermodynamics, you know none of them are going to work. This is very much like this. When you understand the computer science of the oracle problem, which Ben was alluding to, then you don't need to analyze each of the use cases. It's obvious it's not going to work. I mean, it'll work, but it doesn't need to be there. It's just, of course, you're going to sell any perpetual motion machine and create a load of hype around it, but it doesn't mean ultimately that it works. It just means that you're selling it and that there's hype around it. But ultimately, the value isn't there. So that's the thought. It feels very much like describing physics, physical things to people who don't understand physics. So just a thought.
It's a good parallel. I mean, I actually met with the StockX CMO on Tuesday of this week, and the observation that one of the speakers made is it's absolutely. I don't think it's the use case and application is not really like the sneaker. I think the benefits are otherwise, but they're using it to appeal to different emerging demographies, right? They want to be cool, right? So you're still going to get a sneaker, but the currency is cool. So if you want to attract a new audience, you have to have the cool currency exchange. Where it goes up or down from here, no one knows. But that's specifically the use case for StockX.
by the way, Matt, just on that, there's actually a lawsuit regarding trademark issues because Nike is not very fond of having the NFT, including the logo of the Nike in it, even though the current law says that if it's a sneaker, you're selling a physical sneaker, you can certainly say, oh, my sneakers is a Nike because you have the, physical item, you have the rights
Exactly.
associated with it. But now, if you're selling the NFT with the Nike logo in it, it triggers a bit of intellectual property law issues, and that's being litigated right now as we speak in the courts.
Yep.
Okay. Gosh, there was another point I wanted to raise, but we'll move on. The next one is a 51 page.
Tyler, can I make an anecdotal comment?
Sure.
Okay, so several years ago, let's go 10. After the financial crisis last time, I had a buddy that he was a mortgage broker and he's a smart guy, still good friend. He went on to become a 3 times home owner, renting it out in Austin, owns a home in Santa Barbara, has 2 kids, all that stuff. He floated all of that after the mortgage broker stuff on being a ticket broker and having his friends essentially give him use of their credit card so he can exceed all of the Ticketmaster minimums for tons of event tickets all over. And there's a whole slew of
I'm just getting off of this. Hold on.
people doing that. And I think that adds zero value to the economy.
Sorry,
And
getting
this is
off
no
one call
different
and
than
jumping
that.
on another. Went well. Went
Hold
well.
on, Matt, you're unmiked. What happened?
I muted him.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that there's this extra middleware that being added, much like Ben's was describing, when it doesn't have to be done. What do we want to create all these middle markets so that we can create more service economies that can extract wealth? Because I know the people that go on the StubHub, you're not buying tickets at a discount. There's nobody selling it for less than what it was. This is all added margin. So it's going to be how likely are hotel visitors going to want to continue to pay this excess margin for someone who's just a profiteer. That's the way I look at what's going to happen to the brokers that enter this market.
There's another point that, like in the hotel example, I guess many people stay one night in hotels, but I have a 5 night minimum, for example. So I guess the exchange is going to have to make it very easy to coordinate with all of the 20 different parties you're going to have to contact to get 20 nights in a row, consecutive nights. Would seem like that, if anything's an onus, I imagine that's going to be contacting all 20 different, buying 20 different consecutive NFTs to stay, have an extended stay somewhere. Anyway, so the next
You know
is,
what? I just suddenly thought about something. How about Paris Hilton actually pushes on all the Hilton hotels?
that could be interesting. So, a 51-page Senate committee report warns that the U.S. government lacks comprehensive data on ransomware attacks and payments and suffers from fragmented reporting. Okay, I don't doubt that, actually.
Yeah, if you want to go more depth on that, that's because, I mean, there's a bazillion reasons, but a really big problem is that companies don't report when they're being attacked by ransomware because they see it as a reputational risk
Yep,
or for other reasons. And so they're really pushing the reporting requirements, tightening those up. And
exactly right.
you'll see more of that with SEC, failure to
Yeah,
report materials.
there's going to have to be some severe punishments because there's a serious loss to reporting. So why do it voluntarily unless you're forced to?
Well, yeah. Well, actually, it's not as bad. I mean, they're showing the data so far is showing that when you reported it, you actually don't suffer the risk. But there could, people see it. You may have a 1 year if it was a really big attack, but the reporting really helps the community because they can't get their hands around what's going on. So, those are the big themes you'll see. Like, so if banks are being hit, do you want? And they are. Everyone's hit. So if they're being hit, it'd be better if you can communicate this out to your, your business peers, sorry, in the industry, it's a little early, but communicate to the industry so they see it as a big harm because people aren't helping each other in this industry. They're kind of competing against each other by not reporting this and giving best practices. And they are enhancing the liability. They are raising it to the, trying movements to raise it to the board level so that, when you put the board people individually on the hot seat and your cyber insurance isn't going to cover this or your D&O insurance isn't going to cover this,
Right.
that's liability that
Right. UK-based Bloom, which uses AI to offer e-commerce startups revenue-based loans, raises £300 million. That's about $400 million. Series A, led by Credo and Fortress, bringing its, and there's a very good reason for that. In fact, friends of mine just made a very similar startup in Stockholm called Ark Invest, and I'm sorry, Ark. What does Henrik call this company? Ark Capital, spelled with a K. Ark Capital is the same thing. It's data to figure out who should get loans as SaaS startups. It's, I assume, nearly identical to this description. Yeah, e-commerce startups. You have a lot of data as an e-commerce startup, and now you can get, rather than raise money from investors and give away equity, you can get revenue-based loans, right, to continue growing your company, and based on future performance, based on current and historical performance. This makes all the sense in the world. This is rather disruptive to traditional VC models. And this UK company Bloom just raised 300 million. My buddy Henrik just raised a similar amount for his Ark Capital in Stockholm. And I just had Henrik on stage at my event last week. In fact, he was there a month ago as well. So for the past 2 events I did, he was there. And the reason they raise so much money is they only keep about 10% of that money for themselves, about 30 million, to grow the company, and the other 290 million they use for the loans that they're giving out to those startups. So now you know why they seemingly are raising so much money. It's not quite that they've become unicorns overnight. It's that they need a whole bunch of money to give out. Alibaba beats estimates as Q4 revenue rose 9% year over year. Aura Ring from Helsinki partners with Gucci on the Gucci Aura Ring wearable, letting users monitor heart rate, sleep, and more, available at select stores for $1,100, about 4 times the price of a normal Aura Ring. What on earth did they do to the very beautiful Aura Ring to make it worth 4 times more, is what I would like to know.
The G and the
They put a
C.
G on it. Okay.
The
Well,
G
there you
and
go.
the C.
You put a G and a C on that Aura Ring, and next thing you know, you're paying, instead of $300, you got to pay $1,100. Makes sense. That makes all the sense in the world. Same functionality. Yeah, you're right.
if there are people buying the NFT, they'll pay for all this shit anyway.
I'm looking at it right now, and Cheryl was not joking. It's the Gucci logo on the Aura ring, essentially. Yep. Okay. Well, there you go. Now it's 4 times as much. You got the Gucci logo on it. Well done, Aura. And the next is Data AI.
Wait. Sorry, Tyler. So
Yes.
they partnered with Gucci for this?
Yes.
That is hilarious. Because I mean, they do have varying. I wear Aura. I've been wearing it, for many long time. And they do have different types. That go up
Yes.
in value. But that's awesome that they actually partnered with Gucci.
Yeah.
And that's a big statement.
How much did you pay for yours?
Mine's base level, and I have the latest one, which I think I had to renew at around 300. But I've
Yeah.
had several models because they come out of warranty, and then I have to buy a new one.
So, data AI consumer spending on video games will hit $222 billion globally this year, while mobile gaming accounts for more than 61% of the total. And the next is from Protocol that Peter Thiel steps down from Facebook's board, which he joined in 2005 after investing $500,000. Meta announced in February that Thiel would be leaving. Yeah, and I remember reading that headline when that was announced. And that's because shit's going to get crazy in the next election. What else in the big headlines here? Snowflake stock drops 10% on weak Q2 growth guidance. Yep. DeFi startup called Common, which develops a DAO community management service called Commonwealth, raises $20 million. And the UK orders a security review of a chip maker after.
Tyler, can I ask about the DAO community one, and if people in the room can speak to that? Because how do they raise 20 million? Is that to build the project? Because a lot of these DAOs, you sell NFTs as membership, like Kevin Rose's. So what is this one where they're raising funds?
Cheryl, could you please pin that one for Jennifer?
Sorry, repeat again. I wasn't listening.
That's okay. I'll pin it right now. Here we go. I'm going to pin that for you, Jennifer, at the top of the clubhouse room.
Thanks, and also just if anyone here has insights, because
Common
that is.
raises $20 million to build DAO management platform. So maybe they themselves
Oh,
aren't.
that's okay.
Okay, a look at Google's renewed push into e-commerce. Google starts rolling out ads in YouTube Shorts globally and says advertisers will be able to make their video ads on Shorts more shoppable. Oh, so they're not, the Shorts is their version of TikTok, so they're now going to have ads so that the little YouTube TikTokers can monetize and make them shoppable. Because that's, as I've said since the first episode of Tech News Around the World, that's where this has all been going from the beginning. Is
That's
towards.
awesome. Can I back up one more? Sorry, I just love this DAO thing. This is hilarious. DAO, is this a DAO as a service platform? I mean, I'm just gonna, it's like, because it's the platform, right? So is this our new DAAS?
I don't know. Let me see. Yeah.
Sorry, more it's, but that, yeah.
Okay. I think that's it. I think those are your big headlines for today. And boy, with that, we've done over 3 hours today, and we didn't get to the tweets. Did anyone have a truly special tweet that they wanted to make sure that we get into that we didn't cover today in the big stories?
There's one thing that potentially the Supreme Court may come down with the gun law case that would allow more gun carrying rights in the public space. So I thought that's something that we don't know the results until the end of June. But if it were the case based on the oral argument, in light of what happened in Texas, it's going to be a very significant development, particularly knowing that the gunman was 18, barely 18-year-old and just started shooting his own grandmother because she was on the phone talking about some phone bills. So this goes back to what you said yesterday about encouraging more offline activities versus just, these kids growing up with such easy access to guns and not a lot of regulations in terms of controlling where the gun should be carried or how to get these guns. So it would be interest. There's no leak on the opinion yet, but expect to wait for the news for the final decision from the Supreme Court at the end of the June
Okay, so
time
this
period.
hey Tyler, I actually have a legitimate tech headline that just broke. Okay, we can,
Yeah.
can I do that?
Hold on. I have an audio clip if you're going to break some news here.
Okay.
Okay, hold on. It's been a while. I gotta dig into my.
Getting
Oh my!
rusty.
Oh my God! We don't even.
Hello,
I don't.
Ronald.
I don't even.
Da, 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 da.
Here we go. Here it is. Sorry,
Da,
Oh,
da,
Yes.
da, 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 da.
ladies and gentlemen. Ken Frankel with some breaking news. Go ahead, Ken. Take it away,
no,
Ken.
no, no. And by the way,
What's
it may
happening?
be, relatively. This is from the information, so they have a paywall, but we can read a fair amount of it. So they just came out with a story that a top China VC firm struggles to raise funds after 10% return. U.S. investors fears, despite a difficult climate for raising money, at least four top tier Chinese venture capital firms set ambitious goals to raise billions of dollars this year from Western institutional investors. Some have already succeeded, but not all of them. Matrix Partners China, one of China's most prolific early stage VC firms, and an early backer of household names including ride hail app Didi Global and food delivery app ELE.me, you could pronounce it however that is struggling to meet its target of at least 1.5 billion for a new fund from institutional investors in the US and elsewhere, according to three people familiar with the situation. Its fundraising difficulties reflect growing concerns about geopolitical risk as well as China's weakening economy amid COVID-19 lockdowns. Additionally, the performance of Matrix China's recent funds didn't meet some investors' expectations, and that's as much as I can read without because of the paywall. So, but it ties into everything we spoke about, earlier today.
Yes, the butterfly wing effect of the great decoupling. And I'm going through some of the tweets here. Ben found a BBC article of a man who had a double hand transplant. Stephen Gallagher, 48, has a new lease on life after undergoing pioneering surgery in December. He has two new hands. And I guess they're working because he's maybe not that. I don't know. You look at the article. Um, yeah, that's wild. And who was this? Victoria sent in this one from the New York Times that quantum internet teleportation, quantum internet inches closer with advance in digital teleportation. Scientists have improved their ability to send quantum information across distant computers and have taken another step towards the network of the future, the quantum internet. There you go. And what do we got for the next one? Amanda has one, tissue engineering on robot skeleton. That's the kind of shit that keeps me awake at night. Scientists grow cells on a robot skeleton but don't know what to do with them yet because the combination of AI and robotics alone should keep you up at night. When you add that in the genetic component and you get the fucking Terminator, no thank you. Burn it with fire. Twitter agrees to pay 150 million. We covered that one, Amanda. Saudamini found a good one from the BBC about a 3D microbot that's smaller than a flea. And you can see a photo of this incredibly cool thing. Researchers at Northwestern University in the US have created robots less than 1 millimeter, smaller than a flea. That thing's crazy cool looking. A Zoom gaffe sees a British councillor swear in a meeting. Dorian Phillips says he thought his microphone was muted when he used colorful language, quote unquote. It was bound to happen. Block, formerly known as Square, releases findings from international survey on Bitcoin adoption.
Wait, Tyler, can I go back to that Zoom really quickly? Just something that might be relevant to groups. And I don't know about Zoom specifically, but Microsoft Teams for sure. Unless you uh, use a hard turnoff on the volume or that they're doing for ADA reasons. They're collecting everything, and it's kept in transcripts form. So for people to just be aware of that, Zoom probably does the same thing. I mean, they all have ADA requirements. So if you think your volume is off, just be careful, or that you're muted.
Saudamini found one. The headline says, Tech firms are making computer chips with human cells. Is it ethical? The year is 2030, and we are at the world's largest tech conference, CES in Las Vegas. A crowd has gathered to watch it. It sounds like a sci-fi Sounds like this journalist missed their calling as a sci-fi nonfiction writer, is what it sounds like to me. Yeah, well, we will get there. There is going to be the convergence, and it is a really interesting topic, or the concrescence might be a better word, of tech and biology. And I mean tech in like the silicon wafer and biology in the human cell, biological cells. And those two things could start to converge because you can start to do genetic engineering, and genomics, and these two worlds are kind of aiming for a bit of a collision. And then what happens when we unlock kind of the godlike powers of code? You know, biology, it does run on a form of code, and
Yeah,
strange.
Craig Venter famously calls it DNA is software that makes its own hardware, which is very counterintuitive, but it actually speaks to the great similarity between actual code and genetic codes. And look how much we've been able to build in the digital world. There are so many more components than what we see in electronics in the digital world. So the amount of proteins and other things like that, the possibilities are almost quite endless.
Yeah, and it gets really crazy very quickly. It's beyond our capabilities of legislating and our own ability to debate. We can't even debate about gun control. How the fuck are we going to debate about letting kids genetically engineer their own pets and shit? Just forget it. Anywho, tons of fantastic tweets that we don't have time to get into, I think. So I just one more call out to see if anyone had a particularly juicy tweet that they found that they want to make sure we get into. No? Going once, going twice? Okay, there we go. That's your tech news around the world for Thursday, May 26th. We'll do it again tomorrow. Please do join us. Click on the title of the room, follow the Tech News Club, and ring the bell for tomorrow's tech news. And we will see you then. Thank you, everybody.